It fixed it. It went away, and she left for a year.
Yeah.
She comes back a year later. She goes, "Hey, you remember that block you did? Can you do it again?" I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, my hot flash was gone for a year." I was like, "What?" When I was 10 years old, we had to take apart Kalashnikov and put it back together. We had military studies, how the grenade works, how the tank works. And then the last 20 years, it's been a SOF war. Rockets that shut out the IEDs, and then when they come home, they don't have the support they need. So he goes, why don't you do the Stellate-Ganglion Block thing? I called up my brother. I said, hey, I think we can help PTSD. He sent me a patient, and that's how I got into it. Soldiers, they will have twice the level of norepinephrine to people who do not have it. I was treating a bunch of Marines, and one of the Marines said, people in my unit call it gut shot because it changes lives. I thought, what an amazing name.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He's one of the world's leading experts on treatment of PTSD, which we are talking about turning into the acronym PTSI, which we'll get into. He's pioneered the use of multiple therapies to treat PTSI, including a specific protocol for special operations with TBIs. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Dr. Eugene Lipov. Did I pronounce your name right?
You got it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I know this has been in the works for a while, and we have mutual contacts in the book world, and I just can't thank you enough for taking the time to come here, and also for thanking you for the work that you've done. I have spoken with several people that have been or have benefited from a lot of the research and protocols that you've helped develop, and have really changed their lives in such a positive and dramatic fashion. And I just can't thank you enough for the amount of time and energy that you put into doing that.
Thank you. It's been an absolute honor. I've had an absolute pleasure taking care of all type of people, but my favorite group has to be SOF community.
Yeah. What's the reason for that, do you think?
So in medicine, the people that I like working the best are people who want to get better.
Yeah.
People who focus on excuses and explanations. You can imagine how well that goes.
Yeah.
And the other part is I've had the honor to work with a lot of people from Bragg. And then, so I got to actually see firsthand what it takes to become a SF.
Yeah.
And then I did a mini SF training for 4 days
Yeah,
where
cool.
I got to blow up doors and do all that kind of stuff.
Got some TBI of your own from it?
You did. I had mild TBI, but most people whine about it, right? I wrote a paper and come up with a treatment.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, the most impressive thing of everything I've seen so far. So this colonel, no, he was a major, SF major. So I did the blocks on him and his wife. We'll talk about secondary PTSD. So they both got headaches, which happened. So we usually give people Tylenol. So I give him the Tylenol. They only had like 2 pills. So he gave it to his wife. His wife said, no, you take it. I was like, the camaraderie and the self-sacrifice was like crazy for me.
Yeah, huh?
That was like crazy. And that's awesome. So common. So Colonel Tulin's the man who's actually introduced me to a lot of people there. I told him the story. He said, that's normal.
Yeah.
I was like, that's just stunning to me.
Yeah.
Because, in civilian world, they just don't see that.
Yeah.
Give me the Tylenol.
Yeah. Give me 2 of them.
Exactly. Forget about you.
Give me her Tylenol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You kidding me? I don't care how you do it.
Yeah. No doubt.
That was a big one for me.
Yeah. It's such a simple thing, but says so much about the character and the type of people that are in that community. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then the last 20 years, it's been a SOF war.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And who's done? They got shafted. All the rockets got shut out, the IEDs, everything. And then when they come home, they don't have the support they need, physiologic support.
Yeah.
And it's.
Yeah.
And,
well, yeah. I would say
that's why I really love the group.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, it's been hard on everybody. I mean, there's certainly a lot of conventional forces, and for that matter, even law enforcement.
Right.
I think anybody that signs up for or volunteers to do a job where you're basically putting self-preservation on the back burner
Right.
for the sake of others. Kind of all find themselves in that position, where they're in really traumatic experiences, and it's
Oh yeah.
for the betterment of the situation, and my hat's off to all who do that. But what's the last full book that you've read?
Last full book I read. Oh wow, that's a good question. I read a lot of science fiction, military science fiction.
You have a favorite author?
Trying to remember his name.
Jack Carr?
I don't remember him. Asimov used to be a huge.
Yeah.
I read everything about Asimov in sci-fi, but recently, I have to look it up. I have it in my audiobook, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I guess that's my mistake. Jack Carr wouldn't be a military science fiction. It's just kind of military fiction. But is there an element to Asimov's work that stands out? I mean, he's such a prominent and kind of once in a generation type of author. What's your take on him, and why is he so special and so talented, so well remembered?
Well, I think first of all, it was interesting. So there's a lot of similarities to me to him in the sense that he was going to be a physician. He got a degree in biochemistry. I got a degree in biochemistry, and then he was going to medical school. But then he was trying to write medical papers, and he learned how to write science fiction through that. So I think the way he thinks the world is amazing. So the way he writes books is, he used to write books. He would write the ending and then fill in the book. Really? Which is really an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, that's it. It is. That would be hard to do, I would think.
Not for him.
Yeah.
And then science fiction is only one part of it. He's written a lot of regular sciencey books.
Yeah.
Like in biochemistry and science. And I think he has a visionary view. And if you look at, in many ways, he's very predictive. So if you look at I, Robot, one of my favorite books by him, there was a movie about that. And then if you look at Elon Musk and his last robots, we're starting to look very similar, including the bus that was carrying those robots, where there is a bus.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I've seen comparisons.
Right. But if you look at the bus, that was the bus like that was an iRobot that carried the evil robots in there.
Yeah.
So we're getting into this very weird vibe.
Yeah.
And, his predictions, I think a lot of them are going to come true. And he just hatches a broad, foundation. I don't know if you read those books, but
I haven't. I mean, I'm familiar with his work enough to at least understand kind of the gist of it, I guess, but I've not read any of his stuff. Hey guys, I wanted to take a minute to tell you about the Mic Drop Patreon, where you can get the real mic drop experience the way it's meant to be seen. You get completely uncensored, unfiltered, and uncut episodes with nothing held back, just raw, real conversations directly from me to you, without YouTube censorship. Plus, you'll see it days before anyone else, with early premieres and exclusive bonus content that you won't find anywhere else. You get behind-the-scenes access to the show, including pre- and post-show footage with me and the guest both in studio and on location, depending on what the guest is into and what we have going on. On top of that, we've got tons of Patreon-only perks, mic drop swag, access to exclusive merch, and the chance to submit your questions to be asked at the end of every episode. You'll also get a sneak peek at our upcoming guests, so you'll know who's in the studio weeks before anyone else. We're constantly releasing new features and dropping new content based on what you want to see. For our top-tier members, you get the same mic drop challenge coin that all of my guests receive from the upcoming show, which will never, ever be for sale. We've got quarterly merch that's sent out directly to you, a monthly Zoom call with me where we talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, and an active group chat where we all shoot the shit on a daily basis. All of that for just a few bucks a month to support the show. Right now, we're also offering a 10% discount off an annual subscription, which means that you get more than a free month. I want to say thank you to everyone who has already signed up. Your support means that we get to keep bringing you the content that you love. So if you haven't yet, hit the link in the description or go to patreon.com/micdrop and join the team. I'll see you guys in there. Thank you.
Since the Civil War, dogs have stood alongside our military, proving to be indispensable partners. Our military prioritized ensuring proper canine nutrition for optimal performance, recognizing its vital role in mission success. Team Dog embodies that standard, offering science-based, customizable meal plans tailored to your dog's unique needs. Developed by a former Navy SEAL and canine trainer, Team Dog Food ensures the highest quality nutrition for our canine companions. Improve your dog's well-being. Be your dog's hero with Team Dog.
Is there a particular prediction of his that you think has a good chance of coming true that scares you the most?
Robots,
yeah.
AI. I'm really, I mean, so I like a general science understanding. So I've been reading a lot about AI and all the new computers coming along.
Yeah.
That is very frightening. To have a computer that potentially can unlock all the codes, we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And we have done a great job putting everything into automation. Yeah. And, you know, it's like, I like the Terminator series. You know, that was amazing. And then watching that could actually happen. Time travel, maybe. But AI deciding that human beings are bad. Yeah. Like, I was listening to one of the podcasts, and one of the people who were talking about it basically asked the questions like, you know, so if let's say robots or AI was placed in charge, and they look at the planet is dying. Planet is dying because we have 8 billion people. Well, kill the people and planet won't be dying. Yeah. Simple solution.
Yeah. Yeah. They make
okay, that's scary.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie War Games?
Yes.
Yeah, with Matthew Broderick back in the 80s. I mean, to me, that's kind of that same predictive example of
exactly right.
The Whopper, you know, the supercomputer that they make that basically scares itself into DEFCON 5 or whatever. And,
exactly.
Maybe it's 1. I don't remember which way it goes, but yeah, it's such a great movie. But
or the Terminator is the same thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
U.S., Russia attacks U.S.
Yeah. Skynet.
Skynet have you done?
Yeah. Speaking of time travel, if it were possible, where and when would you go?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, frankly, like a lot of people say, oh, my 30s and my 40s were the best. My 30s and the 40s were horrible. So I wouldn't want to go back to that. I would, I mean, if I have a choice...
You can go anywhere back
anywhere I want.
Or forward.
Anywhere, yeah. Forward would be too scary for me because I don't think I want to see what it's going to be like. I think it's going to be very spunky. I think we are at an inflection point right now. Either our society is going to thrive or...
It'll either save itself or it's going to destroy itself.
That's we're very close to that, I think. We're like that. Yeah. In the next 20, 30 years, if you look at everything that's happening, it's like spooky. Yeah. But, you know, it's like I always say, it's like I can't stop the craziness. Like I was teaching people in Ukraine how to do the procedures. I can't stop the war. I can pick up the pieces. But, for example, I would love to meet Rommel.
Really?
I think, to me, I mean, even though he was on the wrong side of the war, but the kind of man he was, the kind of he dealt with his people, I'm sure you know who Rommel was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's an edgy person to want to meet in today's day and age.
Well, I mean, yeah. But, I mean, equally, he went against Hitler. That's why Hitler suggested highly he killed himself. But he was a great commander, and the way he treated his troops was amazing.
Yeah. I think, you know, unfortunately, we live in a day and age where even suggesting, you know, anything positive about something that people would think as abhorrently negative as the Nazi Party was is like you have to condemn every single aspect of it with absolutely no kind of reasoning or
it's extreme, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you know, to me, you know, it's a fascinating time in history. I think the thing that I find myself wondering the most is just how they managed to pull that off.
The Nazis?
Yeah, but I think I'm less bewildered by that now, seeing some of the things that have happened in the last 5 years. You know, so it's just like 10 years ago, I'm like, that's fucking crazy. Like, I can't even wrap my mind around how that happens. And then from 2020 to now, it's not as big of a stretch. Still a stretch, but not as big a one. Do you have a favorite quote?
Wow, I do have a lot of interesting quotes. If you think you can, you think you cannot, you're right both times.
Yeah, that's good.
I use it for my patients all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, at least have an opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just the attitude you take into everything is going to dictate how it goes most of the time.
Yeah. But if you think that, one more, if I may, if you think small, you'll always be small.
Yeah.
If you think big, you may be big.
Yeah. That doesn't work in the bedroom so much, though, does it? Maybe.
It's not the size of the boat; it's the motion of the ocean.
All right, we'll go with that. You live in the United States now?
Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah. It's still United States.
Yeah. Well, for the most part.
Yes, sir.
Do you carry a gun? Do you have an everyday carry gun?
I do not carry a weapon. I do have 2 weapons.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing what they are?
Yeah, they're both Glocks.
Both Glocks.
9mm.
9mm. Do you shoot much? Like, are you a big fan of shooting, or is it just...
Some. I enjoy being in the shooting range.
Yeah.
I really don't like rifles particularly, but I think handguns are useful. And in fact, it was funny because my wife was very much anti-weapons, and at one point, Chicago was getting very spooky.
Yeah.
She suggested I obtain a weapon.
Yeah.
Which I was like, what?
Yeah, I mean, I carry all over the place, but Texas is a little different that way. But I mean, even if I'm in Chicago, I still carry. I mean, I carry everywhere. But what time do you wake up in the morning, and what do the first 3 hours look like of a normal day, if there is one?
Yeah. No, I like, well, it's crucial to get sleep. So I can see, you have the monitor, and I use the Oura ring, same thing. So I sleep 8 hours a day, which is great. I get up about 7 a.m. I usually make coffee for me and my bride. A lot of times I'll walk my dog, which is an amazing poodle called Gomez.
Gomez?
Yeah, Gomez. From Adam's Family.
Yeah,
the lover.
Awesome. Yeah.
So the first thing, he has this whole routine. He eats, he jumps in the bed and stretches out like that, so my wife can rub his belly for half an hour. It is the funniest thing in the world. Pushes
you out of bed.
Yeah, no. By that point, I'm already doing something. I can't really. Once I get out of bed, I'm moving.
Yeah.
And then it depends on the day, but like for example, on Thursdays and Fridays, I go into work and I do the procedures for people. I love writing papers, and I'm starting to work with a lot of students and residents, and we're really coming up with a bunch of really interesting new ideas, trying to get my particular type of thinking is a lot of times you can get a concept which has already been out there, but nobody used it a certain way. So Stellate-Ganglion Block, I didn't invent the procedure. I just applied it in a new way, and I'm trying to do that across the board.
Yeah. It's fascinating work, which we'll dive into here in just a minute. Would like to talk about your childhood a little bit, but first, last lightning round question. If you had to pick one age to be permanently, what age would that be?
Mental or physical?
Either. Whichever is more important.
Physical, I'm in the best shape I've been all my life, actually. I've started exercising. I went to operate into my 90s, and I'm 66. Mentally, this is age. If I can stay like in my early 60s, I'd be ecstatic, because my life before that was pretty spunky.
Yeah. We'll get into that. You're originally from Ukraine.
Yes, sir.
Being 66, obviously things were quite different then. I'm curious, not to get too far off into the topic. I know a lot of what we're going to be covering is the procedural work that you've done with veterans and helping with this procedure. But being that the Russia-Ukraine conflict is such a big deal here in the United States and even internationally, and you being from there, I'm curious, what was it like growing up there, and what is your take on what's going on now?
Well, first of all, I was born there, about 200 miles south of Kiev, and I was there till 6 only. So I left there and I went to Moscow, and I lived there 6 to 14. So my heritage is kind of mixed in that sense. But I do feel connected to Ukraine. So when the war started, I've worked pretty hard to trying to bring the procedure I do there because I knew PTSD would be horrible, and it is horrible. I run into some very interesting characters. Some of them said, well, okay, give me $50,000 and I'll connect you to everybody in Ukraine. I was like, hold on, I'm going to do everything for free. I'm going to give you the equipment. I'm going to train you. You want me to pay you?
You still want to charge me? Yeah,
said,
wow.
You know, that did not go well. Kind of speeding it up a little bit, I ran into some really interesting people. They connect me to a lady who runs 2 hospitals in Ukraine. She has the same background as me, like anesthesia and pain. So we trained her. So she went back and she did her boyfriend. So he has an intelligence there. It's kind of interesting. So
in Ukraine.
In Ukraine. And he's done really well. And he was stuttering. His stuttering went away after the procedure. It's kind of interesting. So I think it's just basically a form of genocide. And how it's going to, I mean, even if it ends today, the legacy of PTSD on both sides of that equation is going to be astronomical and horrific. How it's going to end, I mean, Ukraine is an interesting kind of, I can't believe they're even still standing, frankly. Yeah. I mean, militarily, I thought they would just be decimated. But, with the new administration coming in and this, there's so much uncertainty. And I think people there feel probably very uncertain. So again, I can't stop the war. Still don't have that ability. But I'm so happy that I was able to train that lady. Yeah. And hopefully a lot of people will get treated. And a lot of the misery that's already happening there may be reduced. Yeah.
So spending the first 6 years in Ukraine, I imagine you probably don't remember a ton of that.
No.
Do you remember any of it?
Not really. I had a pretty traumatic childhood. So my father was a flyer in World War II, Red Army, and he would drop bombs on German ships. They didn't like that. So out of 10,000 in his squadron, 100 made it home. So he and his parents were interesting people, shall we say. So it was always very labile. I don't know what kind of home I would be in. So the only thing I was kind of remember, I probably was 4. So some of the boys we were playing with were 2 brothers and my brother and I. So they found this thing that looked like a rusted pipe. So they brought it to my father for whatever reason. He looked at it, it was an unexploded shell from a tank. So he took it from Ray, he dug it in, whatever, took it away. So they found it, and then my father said, don't play with those boys. I mean, that's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so they find this unexploded shell where my father dug it in. They threw it against the tree, nothing happened. They threw it against the rock, well, something did happen. One guy lost 2 arms, another one lost a leg. So that was pretty traumatic. Yeah. And that's the only
friends
thing.
of yours that did that?
Yeah, I used to play with them.
Wow.
Not after that.
Yeah. That was in the first 6 years still in Ukraine.
Yeah. It was a tank battle around there. That's why there was unexploded anti-personnel shell.
Do you know why you moved at 6 years old from Ukraine to Moscow?
Yeah, my parents couldn't find a job there. It was really bad opportunities. My father was a good surgeon. He was a heart surgeon. So he got a job in institute in Moscow. Yeah. So used to would do that.
So from 6 to 14, I imagine you remember a fair bit of that. What was growing up, or at least some?
It's interesting. So that's part of the reason I'm really interested in PTSD, because a lot of my memories of childhood are gone.
Yeah, and it's because it was.
Yeah, it was just such a traumatic. You never know. So my dad was a really strong, smart man, but he was highly traumatized by the war and his parents.
Yeah. What did his parents do that were so?
They were a pain in the ass.
That's
all I remember. They were just, the first thing my father told me he remembered about his parents was 2 years old, they were heading to the court to get divorced. That was the beginning. And I got to meet them more when they came to this country, when they were in their 70s, and they just fought nonstop. Yeah. And my father was very sensitive to that. and it just made them turn gray every time. So I would go with him to pull them out of there.
Yeah.
It was just continuous. Childhood stuff sits with you. It was just a continuous barrage of arguing over garbage.
Yeah.
They just hated each other.
Yeah.
For 70 years.
Yeah.
Nothing special.
Do you remember much about growing up in Moscow in terms of kind of the standard of living, food that you ate, if it was hard to source food? I mean, that's kind of at the height of the Soviet Union.
Yeah. So my mother was also a physician. She would spend 2-3 hours a day, standing in lines getting food. I remember wearing uniforms, which were gray uniforms, which were wool, and I'm sensitive to wool. It was so uncomfortable. And then I was a terrible student. So I was fat, stupid, and I had uniform that I hated, and I had an uncomfortable home to go to.
You had a
so
lot
I was
going
doing
for
great.
you. Yeah.
I was doing great. What a catch.
Yeah, you had a lot going for you, for sure. I guess at that age or while you were still living there do you remember talking about the United States at all? Like it being the enemy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of training that they're the enemy, and we were afraid they're always going to attack and drop bombs on us being in there. And it's like United States was the enemy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Were there any events that took place from 6 to 14 living in Russia that were super traumatic or that you remember really, really vividly?
Yeah. So the biggest one, I would say, so my father was a surgeon again. And then, I was out playing with my friends there. And then, so my father gets on the balcony and said, he started screaming that I need to come home. I was like, and there was something about that tone was really spooky for me. And then he was trying to give his friend some kind of amputation knife, whatever. It's, it's basically a long blade that's used to cut off legs and arms, whatever.
He just has that laying around the house?
Yeah. Whatever the reason.
Yeah. Sounds like a 60s, or like a Russian surgeon, if I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. So bones right there. Anyway, so somehow or other, he couldn't find it. So he got angry, and he asked everybody, and I said, I don't know. So he beat me pretty hard with a belt, whatever. So 2 weeks later, he finds it in some kind of suitcase. So from there on, anytime I heard that voice, I would have twitches. So that was extremely traumatic.
Yeah. I guess anything kind of nationally that took place that was memorable?
I was more interested in my clothes that was itchy.
Yeah.
And not be able to get through the day.
Yeah.
That big thinker, obviously.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite traditional Russian meal growing up?
I don't know if it's traditional, but my mother was a terrible cook. But the thing that she did really well was potatoes and herring and garlic.
Yeah.
I love that. That tasted so good to me. Anytime I could eat it. Every day it was great.
Was that like a special occasion type of meal, or?
She would do it once a week, but she was exhausted. Yeah. And she hated cooking. She just was not a good cook.
That's
amazing woman, but cooking,
not
her strong point. Yeah, so when we came to this country, every Friday she would carry out Carson's ribs.
Oh, yeah.
So that was it. Yeah. That was our big meal here.
Yeah. It's a lot easier on her, right? So
exactly.
That was in 73. You came to the United States from
Russia.
What was the reason for the move? And was there any kind of discussion? I mean, even as a 14-year-old, if you're hearing the United States is the enemy and we're worried that they're going to bomb us, was there any kind of misunderstanding or for you kind of confusion on, well, why are we moving there then?
I really did not. I was not a big thinker in that day. So basically my parents said, I'm going, we're going. I wasn't like, well, I'm afraid. So my parents were Jewish, and they really got pretty bad anti-Semitism there. And then so my father was one of the 100 people who were refuseniks. I don't know if you remember that term.
Did what?
They call them refuseniks, people who didn't want to stay in Russia.
Oh, okay.
And that's when Kissinger was there.
Oh, okay.
So basically they had a choice either to whack him or put him in Siberia or whatever. or to get rid of them. So they found it was easy to get rid of them. So
Yeah.
they got rid of them.
Yeah. Did you know that high blood pressure is one of the highest risk factors for mortality? In fact, 1 in 2 adults have high blood pressure. That's a 50-50 chance that you're a walking time bomb. But you, not Big Pharma, can help take control of your blood pressure before it's too late with 120 Life. 120 Life is a blend of great tasting superfruit juices that can actually help lower your blood pressure. 120 Life is formulated with ingredients that have been shown to naturally help control high blood pressure and are endorsed by thousands of health professionals. You can try it yourself risk-free with their 2-week trial pack. Just go to 120life.com and use the code DROP, all caps, all one word, to save 15% and receive free shipping. They are so sure that 120 Life can noticeably lower your blood pressure in 2 weeks that they'll give you your money back if you're not satisfied. 120 Life offers a risk-free trial with a full refund if you don't see lower numbers in 2 weeks. You know, blood pressure is one of the most alarming and challenging things that this country faces in terms of health on a day-to-day and personal basis. The nice thing about 120 Life is you can do on-the-go powder if you're traveling, or if you're quick jumping in your car, what have you. You have on-the-go already pre-mixed packs. So got one for each of you, and I encourage you to check it out. Thousands have benefited from 120 Life. It's a choice you can trust for your health. So you have nothing to lose except for those high blood pressure numbers. Go to 120life.com. That's 120life.com. And remember to use the code DROP, D-R-O-P, all caps, to save 15% and free shipping. This is serious. This is your life we're talking about. 120 Life can help. These statements have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. If you're a red-blooded American exercising your Second Amendment rights, then StopBox USA was built for you. Keeping your loved ones safe while ensuring instant access to your firearms is one of the biggest challenges gun owners face. Many storage options force you to fumble with keys or gamble on a battery that might fail when it matters most. That's why StopBox USA engineered the StopBox Pro, a game-changing, patented push-button locking system that's entirely mechanical. The StopBox Pro has no keys, no batteries, and is instantly accessible when you need it. This means you could be ready even in the dark or under stress. Crafted with glass-reinforced polycarbonate, it's as tough as it is secure. Our listeners are getting 10% off your entire order when you use the code MICDROP, all caps, all one word, but they're also giving you a buy one, get one free offer on their StopBox Pro. That's 10% off and a free StopBox Pro when you use the code MICDROP at stopboxusa.com. You know, whether you have kids in the home or you're just trying to keep your personal firearms safe and secure, but also readily accessible, I got to tell you, this thing is super well made. It's really easy to open, and it just gives you the security coupled with being able to get to your firearm quick. I love it. I use it. I have it at my house. It's also great to travel with. You can throw a padlock on it that's TSA compliant and travel in your checked bag with the airline. So love the product. Go check them out. American made. Can't beat it. All StopBox USA products are proudly made in the United States and in their own facility. Not only does this ensure the high quality of craftsmanship of every product sent out, but it also creates meaningful jobs and opportunities for American workers. Traveling with peace of mind is easy because the StopBox Pro is also TSA compliant. StopBox USA also offers a range of other innovative products, including their vehicle safe, chamber lock, and other essential gear designed to help keep you prepared and protected wherever you are. For a limited time only, our listeners are getting a crazy deal. Not only do you get 10% off your entire order when you use the code MICDROP, all caps, all one word, at stopboxusa.com, but they're also giving you a buy one, get one free on that StopBox Pro. That's 10% off and a free StopBox Pro when you use the code MICDROP, all caps, all one word, at stopboxusa.com. Discover a better way to balance security and readiness with StopBox. As you guys know, sleep is a huge component to recovery and really all aspects in life, and it's something that a lot of us have struggled with, for a lot of our lives, frankly. As you know, I've been a big proponent of Beam, which is a hot cocoa that you drink before you go to sleep, and it's helped tremendously in terms of hours of sleep maintained as well as the quality of sleep. Today, my listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder, which is their science-backed hot cocoa for sleep, and it's got no added sugar. Better sleep has never tasted better. As you know, other sleep aids can cause next-day grogginess and just make you feel crappy, but Dream contains a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, and apigenin, also melatonin, to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling refreshed. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/micdrop, all caps, all one word, and use code MicDrop, all one word, all caps, at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/micdrop and use code MicDrop for up to 40% off. Where did you guys first move to?
Chicago.
So you've been
Never
there
moved.
Yeah. What was your impression? Did you speak any English? Did you move there and it was just like...
Though I had no idea of English. Well, it was funny. So my father was working as a surgical assistant, and he got paid about $4,000 a year for that, which was a pretty interesting way for a family of four. But so I got a first job was in a laundromat, and I'm going to answer your question. So my first two words were in the box or in the hangers. So when somebody come by and say, I would like my shirt is in the box or in the hanger. So those are my two words. I've come a long way, don't you think?
Yeah, you've come quite a ways. Was it a huge culture shock?
Oh my God, absolutely.
So in a good way, or?
It was disorienting, and also my body changed. So I grew like 3 inches. My IQ jumped probably 40 points, and I was able to do stuff that I couldn't imagine doing. I was still fat. I was still pretty slow in that sense, but mentally I was starting working. But like going to high school where you can wear whatever you like was like, wow, weird. Plus, I didn't have to wear that itchy crap.
Yeah.
So I went to a really excellent high school, Francis W. Parker, which is like an amazing school in Chicago. And then, it was so people will just go, oh, let's go to Aspen for skiing. It's like, yeah, right. We have no food. We're talking about Aspen for skiing. I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. But it was a very different way people were interacting, right? It wasn't as regimented. Like Russian schools were like
military.
Just to give you a feel for that, when I was 10 years old, we had to take apart Kalashnikov and put it back together.
Oh, wow.
So like an hour a day, we had military studies, how the grenade works, how did the tank work, what are the weapon designs, what is the difference, anti-personnel as opposed to armor piercing.
Wow.
At 10 years old. Right?
Yeah,
and we would go on maneuvers, like we have to go in a face mask for like 2 miles.
Yeah.
With a gas mask. That's not easy for a 10-year-old
For
kid.
anybody.
Or a 10-year-old especially, right?
Yeah.
And then you had to qualify. In order to go to the next grade, you have to do a certain amount of speed on skis cross country.
Really? Wow. That's part of grade advancement.
Yeah.
Wow.
Totally normal.
Did you struggle with that, I imagine, being fat and slow?
Being fat and non-coordinated. The ski, the skis, when you put them across, it doesn't go so good. I don't know why.
Strangely enough. So I guess I'm curious about the shift in your ability to learn. You said 40 points in IQ, and you grew up, like, was it because now you had more food, or was there something attributable to that?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people about that. I don't know. But part of the reason I've been interested in neuroscience is because to understand that. So it could have been vitamins. It could have been the stress of changing to a different country. Who knows? But one of the things, though, is what we do know is that in adolescence, from 12 to 16 years old, we lose about 1/3 of our neurons.
Really?
That interesting, yeah. It's called pruning. So because that's why you start to have dominant pathways. So I think I have a lot of other stuff going on. I was born a lefty, and they changed me to a righty when I was 6, and I had stutter for like 5 years after that. It's a very common thing when people change in arms.
Are you left eye dominant? Do you shoot left eye?
I shoot right eye.
Oh, okay.
Right eye. But I can operate with either hand, and I can shoot with either hand.
Yeah. But I guess rifle-wise, you shoot right-handed.
Yeah, it's always right.
That's pretty interesting. I didn't realize the 12 to 16 pruning effect.
Yeah, you lose a third of your neurons.
Do you know why that's? Is there any understanding that we have as human beings as to why that happens?
Well, first of all, it's physiology, just how God built us. But there is an advantage to that. If you think about it as an adult, there is a lot of, if you don't have a clear path, like prefrontal cortex that controls you, right? So this is what gives you, mental strength. You're not peeing on your feet, all of that. You want to have your prefrontal cortex be as strong and as focused as possible. Yeah. If you have so much input, you're going to be confused, and you believe in magic because, like, this is magical stuff. As an adult, believing in magic may be great in Middle Ages, but now probably not so good. That's how I look at it.
So it's the pruning effect is essentially nature's Adderall, right? It's like making you focus on...
I guess. In a way. Without the drug.
Probably not a fan of Adderall, I imagine.
No. Yeah. No, not so much.
Yeah.
A lot of, by the way, I've treated a number of Delta guys, and most of them were on Adderall.
Really?
After the block, they stopped Adderall.
No shit. Wow. Well, yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. Your parents were physicians in Russia. That doesn't translate to America. What did they do when they got here? Did they get certifications and go into the same line of work?
They both got recertified. So my mother did a residency. So she was an internal medicine doctor and an endocrinologist. She's a gland doctor. And my father got his license, and he worked as a surgeon, like a general surgeon, not a heart surgeon.
Yeah.
Heart surgery is a little more involved. But they had an office together, and they worked together.
Oh, wow. I do have a note that your mother had debilitating depression and ultimately took her own life.
That's true.
At what age were you when that happened?
Well, I finished medical school. 3 months later, she died. So I was 23.
Did from the time you moved to the United States until that happened, did you notice or see a decline? Did you have any idea that was a possibility or even a likelihood, or was it a total shock?
It was not a total shock, that's for sure. I mean, it was a shock when I found out, and I'll tell you how I found out. But what happened was that we had so much havoc at home, so much pressure, we all had psychiatric issues. Not diagnosed, but we were just going through the motions. I mean, we were doing well in the sense that I was finishing medical school, my parents had an office, but they had a lot of stress because they opened a bigger office and overhead, My brother was finishing his residency, so we were all doing things, but, it was very stressful. I remember, like, one day my mother didn't, so she went shopping, and she didn't let my father know for a couple hours. She came home, and he was really pissed off. He cut up all the clothes that she bought. I mean, that's like, is that a normal child household? And I would say no. And then, so as I was finishing my training, I mean, it's like, I'll tell you, my favorite kind of, it'll give you a feel what kind of environment I was in. So we went to a 2-week vacation in Hawaii when I was 21, something like that. Hawaii paradise, right? God, it was horrible. So it was fighting through the whole thing. So I came back and I said, look, here's the deal. I can't handle this. I'd rather stay in school and study as opposed to go to with you guys ever again. This is just too painful. I can't do it.
Why was it painful?
It was screaming at each other.
Really?
I mean, 2 weeks of screaming at each other. There's no place to go, right? Yeah. You're in a small hotel room. Yeah. Where are you going to go?
Was it just over dumb stuff? I mean,
bullshit. Yeah. Well, I want to go this. No, I don't want to go to this. I want this. I want this. Like,
yeah.
Just to fight.
Screaming at each other.
Just screaming, and it's like I. That's why I'm extremely thankful to my wife. Now we've been married 28 years. We never scream at each other. We've had maybe 3 disagreements.
Yeah,
in 28 years. I don't like that. She doesn't like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we can resolve it. You don't need to scream. And then, like, it was funny. She always tells me this story. Like, when we met, she said, oh, let's go for a trip. I said, oh, anything but that? Yeah. Vacation? Anything but that? She goes, what's wrong with you? Yeah. I said, but it's freaking painful. I said, does it have to be painful?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, so that was tough. But back to the question you originally asked me. So as I was getting close to graduation, I was looking forward to moving out of the house because I lived in the house when I went to medical school and undergraduate. And so I was looking forward to apartments, and my mother said, if you leave, I'm going to die.
Oh, wow.
I said, why? She said, it's like, it's so hard to live with your father. I said, then why don't you just leave him, get a divorce, do whatever. So, well, I can't do it, blah, blah, blah. So, of course, I leave, and then I was doing we were doing AAA, which is abdominal aorta, so we were all covered in blood. There's bladder procedure. So we get a phone call, it's like, my father is crying, my brother is crying, so mother died. It was, it was quite the day.
Yeah. Was there any guilt? Did you feel any guilt?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Is that something that you struggled with for a while and then kind of moved through it, or is it something that's always bothered you?
No, I mean, actually, I'll tell what I've done with that, which is, I think is pretty snazzy. I look at the brain as a car. You either are driving the car or the car is driving you. So if you close your eyes, you're not going to stay in a highway. So I take responsibility for what happens to me. I think that's part of the reason I really love SOF, because SOF guys take responsibility for what happens to them. There's no excuses, no whining, no explanations, none of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yes, I felt very guilty because if I would have stayed, I may have, she may not have died, which is probably not true, but we all contributed to it more or less.
Yeah.
But every time I help a people, and it's like I've been extremely blessed that I have so many people tell me, hey, you've changed my life, you saved me from suicide, I'm doing great. Every time I hear that, I feel like my mother's giving me a pat in the back. You've done something great with
That's awesome.
the horrible stuff that I put you through.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Who is to say it's not true?
Yeah, no,
Right?
nobody. Right?
Exactly.
So the path that you went into, was that almost forced upon you by your parents? Was it heavily encouraged, or was it something that you legitimately wanted to do?
Well, that's another amazing question. So when I started undergraduate at Northwestern, I loved biochemistry. Same thing Asimov did.
Yeah.
So my choice was either to go into biochemistry and science, whatever, or to do medicine like everybody in my family did, basically. And part of the reason I wanted to do that is because, I understood it. And so the idea was my parents would build a practice, and then my brother and I would take over, and they would retire, and that was the plan. I wasn't quite sure if I really wanted to do that, considering how complex my family was. But I do I'm an empath. I can feel when people feel. Great thing as a physician, pain in the ass thing when you're a trauma surgeon and people are dying right and left.
Yeah.
Don't recommend that.
Yeah.
But the reason I didn't go into biochemistry is because I would miss the people interaction. So that's why I went to that.
Okay. Did your brother follow suit and do the same thing?
He's 3 years older, so
okay.
he is an internist. So
okay.
he finished medical school 3 years before me.
Is he still doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's an amazing internist. He's brilliant.
Yeah. What? Forgive my ignorance. What does that entail?
Internist?
Internal medicine?
Yeah, like
okay.
a regular doctor.
Oh, okay.
Right. I mean, he's not GP. He specializes in internal medicine.
Yeah.
And then gerontology, which is older people.
Yeah. Okay. If you could kind of outline once you graduated, from when you graduated, kind of your professional career path up until you kind of, I don't want to say stumbled upon this, but created, developed, and ultimately ended up where you're at.
Thank you. First, I was born. No, I finished medical school in 1984, and I started surgical residency at Cook County Hospital. Pretty intense environment. And then my mother died 3 months into my internship, which is not the best time to have that happen, obviously, or ever. So I was distraught I took a week off, and I was out of it. And then I went back to work, and then, again, it was very intense. And then I got through the first year, and I thought, let me hang in another year and see what I'm going to do. But I had about a half of my drive at that point because so my father would call me every day saying it's the worst day of my life, which, I mean, I'm sure it was terrible for him. So everybody in his family basically turned his back on him because they blamed him for the suicide, and it was just a complete disaster. So halfway through my second year, I said, yeah, I really can't do it anymore. I just don't have the oomph. To be a general surgeon in Cook County Hospital, you have to have a lot of oomph. So I lost my oomph, and I tell
That's a scientific term.
Oh, very technical. I like sciencey terms. Very special.
How do you measure that?
Very carefully.
All right.
But I definitely didn't have the oomph.
Yeah.
So I went to my chairman and I said, I have to quit surgery. I can't do it. She says, we'll miss you, but goodbye.
We'll miss you, but
hey,
don't let the door hit you.
Goodbye. Exactly. So they were giving away, before I left, they were giving away the anesthesia contract. And because nobody wanted to get into anesthesia. Now everybody wants to go with that specialty. Then nobody wanted to do it. And then, so I said, I'm going to take a year off. I thought I was going to go into management, like get an MBA and stuff like that. And then I just forgot about anesthesia. So, and I was doing other odds and ends, like in emergency rooms. And then I find I hated the business part of it. Like to be a CEO of the hospital, I was like, I'm not going to do that. So I thought, all right, fine. So I started anesthesia residency. Hated every moment of it. It is so, I mean, some people love it. I've done every complex anesthetic known to mankind. It is extremely boring. Plus, to me, I have more of an alpha personality. Anesthesia, with all due respect to all the anesthesiologists, and thank you for saving lives. I love it. But for me, I felt very uncomfortable.
I mean, because I assume you're kind of taking a back seat to the surgeon, right?
Of course. They're driving.
Yeah. And so they can dictate to you, and you just have to kind of do it.
Yeah. And then my favorite one, we were doing this complex chest surgery, and the surgeon cuts into the thoracic aorta. There's blood all over the place. It's screaming at me. I said, can you put a finger so it stops bleeding? Hello? I mean, really, yell at me for cutting the heart?
Yeah.
I wasn't even there.
Yeah.
That was, but I'm, anesthesia is. So I was able to find a little home in pain medicine anesthesia. And what I like about it, we had my own patients, and I could, basically be in charge of being in charge.
Yeah.
And then, so I was doing that for years. And then the first time I did Stellate-Ganglion Block, which we're going to talk about, is in 1987 in the VA hospital. It used to be called West Side VA Hospital. And then the way we used to do it is blind, basically. You press around. And
That's
you
reassuring.
Go, yeah, the needle goes here.
We're just going to poke around for a little bit and see what.
Well, that's pretty close because you didn't see then. We didn't have the equipment.
Yeah.
And then I did advanced training at Rush. And then we started using X-rays so it became much more accurate. Now we use ultrasound, so it's even more accurate. So it's really great from that perspective. But one of the questions people ask me is, how do you even fall into it, as you say? So it's a funny story. So Rush Pain Clinic, specialty was CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, or RSD. Basically, it's sweating, hand sweats, and then if you blow on the hand, it burns. It feels like somebody's pouring acid on it.
So you sweat on the top of your hand.
Right. But it also swells, and if you touch it lightly like that, it's called allodynia, it burns.
What is the condition called?
CRPS.
Okay.
Or used to be called RSD. 1.5 million people in the country has that.
What causes it?
And there's a lot of debate about it, but the nerves basically hook up. Fight and flight nerves hook up with regular nerves, and there's a part in the brain. But the key point is anybody listening to that, and if you have that condition, get it treated sooner than later.
Yeah.
And there are available treatments for that, which is great. It could be in the hand. Typically, it's extremity, hands or legs.
Yeah. Wow.
So light touch burns. Some of the patients I see, if a wind hits them, they start crying.
Is that typically either an insulin issue or any type of they've taken certain medications too long and it's fucked with their nerves? No?
Nope.
It's like a genetic thing?
If you're going to get it, here's how you'd get it. Get a cast on a little too tight, and then you'll get it.
Oh, okay.
You can get at 4 years old, you can get it. I've seen a 2-year-old boy have it.
Oh, that'd be horrible.
Yeah, it's a genetic predisposition. I've had 2 twins at 2 young ladies. They're both 15 years old. They both had left foot CRPS.
Oh, wow.
From minor injuries, right?
Yeah, that's
Crazy.
terrible. Yeah.
Anyway, so back to the show. So I had a patient that, a lovely woman, she had neck pain. So she came in and did some nerve injections. I burned some nerves to take away the neck pain and such things. Great. But what's really bothering me is hot flashes. So I said, hey, I don't do hot flashes. I'm a pain guy. I don't do hot flashes. So I sent to my brother. So he did whatever he usually does for hot flashes. It didn't work. So he goes, why don't you do the Stellate-Ganglion Block thing? It works on hand sweats. Maybe it works for the whole body. I'm like, oh, no, it doesn't. He goes, how do you know? I said, nobody's done it. I said, why don't you try it? So I did it, and it went away. Hot flash went away.
Is that something where you I assume legally have to tell her, hey, we've never done this before, but we're going to try it, see what happens, and she has to be okay with that?
Yeah. So one of the big questions about Stellate is that FDA approved? Number one. Number two, how do you decide when to do it? So as a physician, rightfully so, I think, we are allowed to use conventional therapeutic for new indications. So when somebody does Stellate, in the United States, it's used for CRPS and headaches, pretty much. In Japan, it's used for 20 different things.
So in the United States, that's where it originated for the treatment of those two things.
It actually originated in France. Asthma, 1926.
Oh, wow.
The point is, I've used Stellate-Ganglion Block for facial pain after shingles.
Yeah.
You can use it for different conditions. So basically, the way I've presented the patient, the way I would always present, it's like, hey, this is not a standard approach. I know how to do the procedure because I've done it for years. But what you have going on may be responsive to it. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's how we did it.
And it fixed it.
It fixed it. It went away, and she left for a year.
Yeah.
She comes back a year later. She goes, hey, do you remember that block you did? Can you do it again? I said, why? I said, well, my hot flash was gone for a year. I was like, what? Why would that possibly be? I don't know. Do it again.
Were they coming back?
Yeah, they came back.
Yeah. Is that typical where this is something where it has to be redone at a periodical basis or at a regular interval to maintain the results?
In general, maybe. I'll give you an example. So CRPS, right, the burning of the hand, if you do it in the first 3 months, you do 1 or 2, you're done.
Yeah.
It resolves it forever.
Oh, okay.
Or close to forever.
Yeah.
For hot flashes, similar. It may be 1. For PTSD, you may need 1 or you may need 6.
Wow.
It depends on your genetics. It depends on what you do afterwards, like with PTSD, meditation. And also, like, we took care of a policeman in Chicago who was an ex-Marine. So he was doing great after 1 block. Then he had to shoot a guy in the line of duty. A year later, he came back to see me.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it depends on what happens to the body.
Can you kind of get in the weeds and describe or explain, rather, what that nerve is and kind of how it actually is affected, like how that procedure has the effect that it does?
If I may, I just want to tell you how I got from hot flashes to PTSD.
Yeah, please do.
Because that's going to answer the question. Yeah. So Chicago Tribune, this is, I think, cute story. Chicago Tribune came by and, I wrote another paper, blah, blah, blah. They came by to do an article about me, about this. I knew I was in trouble when I read the first line. They said, Bianca Kennedy, this beautiful breast cancer survivor, 35 years old, was so desperate to get rid of hot flashes, she let Dr. Lipov plunge a 3-inch needle in her neck.
Plunge.
When people called me a needle plunger, that's where it's from. And then they talked to Northwestern, what I meant, because they go, no, yes, it works, but he doesn't know how it works, so it's garbage. And they went to Rush, they did the same thing. So they gave me a lot of encouragement trying to understand why it works. So I read through about 3,000 articles. One of them was from Finland, where they did T2 clipping, which is basically you put 2 tubes in, push the lung out of the way. There is a fight and flight nerve here. They clipped it for hand sweats, and PTSD stopped. I was like, what in the hell is that? So then if you look at the anatomy, this fight and flight nerve grows from chest to the neck and up to the brain. All of those published, but nobody really put it together. That's why I called up my brother. I said, hey, I think we can help PTSD. He sent me a patient, and that's how I got into it. So as far as the weed goes, I mean, what's the nitty-gritty of it? So let's say trauma happens. Either severe trauma or multiple trauma, whatever. Doesn't really matter. So there are nerves that go from the brain down the spinal cord, out of spinal cord, back into the neck and back to the brain. Why? Don't know. When there is severe trauma, it produces something called NGF, nerve growth factor. It's called neurotropin. So if you take that substance and inject inside the brain of the rat, fight and flight nerves start to grow. That's called sprouting. Yeah, that's called sprouting. So when there's trauma, NGF is produced in the brain. It gets carried from the brain to the Stellate-Ganglion, which is here, and it makes those nerves grow. As long as NGF is in the neck, in this ganglion, instead of, let's say, 5, now you got 10 of those nerves, and each one of them is secreting norepinephrine. So if you take the fluid around the brain, it's called CSF, and analyze it, the soldiers or other military personnel, they will have twice the level of norepinephrine to regular people who do not have it. So norepinephrine is like adrenaline's brother. So as long as that persists, people will have symptoms of PTSD. So what's funny is that when you put the needle in the neck and you put local anesthetic in there, like bupivacaine, that's what's used for women to give childbirth, it turns off NGF here, and it leads to pruning. So instead of 10, we're back to 5. So there is less nerves pumping out norepinephrine. So a procedure or local anesthetic lasts about 8 hours. But we've seen now, the longest outlier right now is 18 years. He's had 2 blocks.
Oh, wow. And you're using Novocaine?
Bupivacaine.
What's the difference?
Novocaine is ester, which is the old type anesthetics.
Oh, okay.
They have a lot more complications. Bupivacaine is cleaner, and that's what's used on mothers who are pregnant. It's it's pretty safe.
Yeah,
if you put it in the right place.
Yeah, that's fascinating and leads to a ton of follow-up questions. I guess first off, when you do that procedure and you use the
ultrasound.
No, I'm sorry. The
bupivacaine.
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 Okay. Is there any other? Have you experimented with any other types of anesthetics to try to even further prolong the outcome? Like, have you been able to try different things, or is it pretty much relegated to that?
I've tried a little bit, but again, this is not something. In order to do like real experiments like that, you need a lab, you need a lot of money.
Yeah.
I've tried a little bit, but not much.
I guess, with such an extensive background in anesthesia, is there another compound that you can think of that maybe would work better that you would want to try?
Maybe. But the answer is I think the bigger question is how do you make the effect last longer?
Yeah.
Right, that's the question.
Right.
So let me give you an example from pain medicine. That's what we actually do now. So if somebody, let's say, has hernia surgery, a lot of times there is a nerve that gets injured, iliac nerve. So they come in to see me. I do local anesthetic injection. Pain goes away, 2-3 days, and they're back. So what do you do then? So then we do something called pulse radio frequency. We put a needle next to the nerve, and we send electrical current in that, and that could last 3 months to 3 years. So let's say I do an injection on somebody. 3 things can happen. They do great, marvelous, and lasts a long time, so we're fine. 2, there's no effect at all, then we're not the right answer. Or 3, they have a very good response, but it doesn't last. If it doesn't last, then we do the pulse radio frequency,
Okay.
which is electrical way of treating it.
Yeah. Is there, do you foresee any connection in terms of stem cell regeneration of cells and being able to use that technology to either prune or grow depending on what's necessary? Can you see that becoming a fix also, or no?
Not directly, and I'll give you the reason for that. Because the other thing people have done, for CRPS, again, there is a lot of literature. So people have tried to make it last longer. So one of the things you can do is pull something called phenol. That's what they soak the bodies in of dead people,
Yeah.
the cadavers, when they do surgeries.
It's the
Learn how
same
to
as
do it.
formaldehyde?
Similar.
Yeah.
So phenol kills nerves. So you put it in here, it'll last longer, but there are a couple of problems with that. There are other nerves around that goes down your hand. It can kill those nerves. We don't like that. Also, even if you go in and surgically take it out, the nerves are very sneaky. The ones from the chest will grow around it and it'll be worse. So it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So I think all those kind of advanced biologics, so the only thing that I would probably use if I was going to, but I don't think, probably is not going to, I don't think it's going to help. I'd much rather use electrical stimulation than some exotic drug. But there's something called X-Pro. So it's basically microsomal bupivacaine. It's in little bubbles. So you put it in, and it lasts much longer. I haven't really tried it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it costs a lot more. It's like $1,000 a vial.
Oh, wow. So I guess when you first discovered that now this works for PTSD, where did it kind of branch off, and how did you ultimately end up getting linked up with the military and that whole path?
Yeah. So the first guy we treated was my brother's patient, and he was basically working in a used drugstore, and they abused him during a robbery. So he was on his way to the psych ward. And so he stopped in my office, and we took care of him, and he did great. So we published on that. The second guy was really interesting because he was Special Forces from Peoria, Illinois. So he was brought down twice in Iraq, and then he had TBI from being brought down. But then he was in charge of a squad in Baghdad, and a 10-year-old kid was sent to take them out. So he shoots a child, pieces of child hit him. He comes home, totally distraught, tried to kill his wife 3 times. Jeez. So his employer was a son of my patient. So, and this particular guy, he and I would argue about bizarre things like, what was the last thing Hitler said to Mussolini on a train?
You guys are arguing about that?
Yes. They were like, no, wait a minute. No, that's not true. So apparently Hitler said, it's like next time Mussolini on the train, I'd rather have my teeth taken out. But just to give you historical fact.
Yeah.
But again, we had a really interesting relationship. So he said, my son has this guy, he's military, but I hear you're getting into PTSD, or can you help him? So that was my patient number 2. So his name was Jason Brown. We treated them, it's been 18 years ago. So then I realized, since my father had PTSD and my mother's death, I think we really need to look at that in better detail. And then so some of the patients I've taken care of were snipers, and they were just engineers by that point, but I actually got connected to them, and I said, I'd really like to get that. So that was about 2006. So then I got connected to some VFW posts, and then so somehow or other, they said, this really has potential. So they introduced me to a lovely woman who was a lobbyist. So I was able to get support from Senator Obama for that. So I was trying to do a study in 2007. So from there, it started rolling. So I met like colonels and generals in Illinois forces.
Okay. You mentioned there's been some work done in this same realm with TBI and it playing a big role in helping repair that as well.
Right, so there's different TBIs. There's TBI, or like CTE, when you get bebop in the head or something, and there's BTBI. I only learned about that since I had a little BTBI myself. Yeah. So Jason Brown, so he had pretty severe TBI. He was knocked out over an hour twice in Iraq. So we were able to get functional MRI, which is like an advanced brain scan, and we were able to demonstrate that his hippocampus, which is memory, was actually improved after the block. So we've seen it in a number of people. especially with SOF, because there is so much BTBI and TBI there, that the cognition was improved. So recently, there was a paper, not by me, but other people, showing that it does help TBI function.
Does it work in the same fashion where in BTBI, the cerebral spinal fluid has that norepinephrine in it, and that's what's causing the PTS or the TBI damage, or is it a totally different mechanism?
No, it's a different mechanism, I think. And then, let me tell you the current treatment I do, which I call SOF method. And again, the reason I call it SOF method because I developed specifically for BTBI and PTSD. The BTBI, which is blast-traumatic brain injuries, you take the brain, you shake it, the whole thing, as opposed to bebop somebody in the head with a stick, which is a different part of the brain is affected. But if somebody has BTBI, the chance of developing PTSD is much higher. So they're linked.
Okay.
They work together because if you think about it, if you lose prefrontal cortex, which is here, it's very common you get hit in the head in front. PFC, prefrontal cortex, suppresses the amygdala. Amygdala is where PTSD lives. So if you have a suppression that's going away, so the controller goes away, then amygdala can go crazy, which is a bad thing. So what we found is that if you combine ketamine, so when I have we've treated about 30 first-year operators from Canada so far. So they come in, we do ketamine Monday, ketamine Tuesday, ketamine Wednesday, then we do right-sided SGB, or what I usually call now DSR, which is with 2-level, we can talk about that. And then the next day we do left-sided, and we do ketamine one more time. So what ketamine does, it does some good things and not so good things. You probably heard of ketamine, people using it.
Yeah, I mean, they use it a lot in veterinarian applications.
Right, of course. So the ketamine makes, it can repair nerve injury, it makes nerves grow. But it also causes some bad things. It activates NGF, and you have the fight and flight nerves grow. So some people can go a little cuckoo from ketamine. It also activates something called BAX gene. So that gene produces a protein that actually chews up hippocampus. Hippocampus is what you need for memory. Hippocampus, turns out, suppresses the amygdala. So that's not good.
Yeah. So
stellate reduces the sympathetic growth, and it also reduces the BAX gene. So there is synergy between those two.
Okay, so combining the two, the stellate block minimizes the negative impacts of the ketamine.
Correct, but you still have the good stuff.
Yeah,
but you take away the negative stuff. Yeah.
Okay. I noticed that, for kind of specializing on the military side, especially with special operations forces, you're dealing with adults who were traumatized as adults. And I know, if I remember correctly, you mentioned the length, from the time that you were injured, that the PTS is from, the longer that takes place, kind of the more set in it is, correct?
No.
Not necessarily?
The other part, I disagree with you as far as SOF people are not traumatized as adults.
What do you mean? Well, sorry.
No, let me tell you what I'm saying by that.
Okay.
And I have a very specific reason I say that.
All right.
So if you talk to most SOF people, most of them had really terrible childhoods. They came through crazy stuff, or they wouldn't be able to make SOF cut.
I guess is the PTSD that they're experiencing, is it a combination of childhood trauma and this? So I guess my question is let's remove the military equation. Let's say children who went through traumatic experience, whether it was physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, maybe a combination of the three, and now they're in their 30s, 40s, what have you, and still experiencing a lot of trouble with those things. Would this have a similarly impactful outcome with that amount of time taking place from the traumatic experiences taking place?
Short answer is yes, but there's a little caveat to that. So we took care of a guy who was involved in Ted's offensive. He was 18 years old. So he had shrapnel go through his head. and he got knocked out. Horrible. So I met him when he was 72.
Oh, wow.
So I did the block on him. He comes out crying like a baby for half an hour. I was like, I broke this guy.
Yeah.
So he comes down. I said, what's going on? Why are you crying? He said, I have not felt an emotion in 50 years.
Wow.
So, in fact, 2 years later, I can show you that footage. We had a fundraiser in New York City. He talked about how it changed his life. His kids came by and told him, thank you for bringing my father back. The length of trauma doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean, that's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
And as far as childhood trauma in SOF, I think makes him more likely to develop PTSD compared to people who did not, who had a normal childhood.
Yeah.
Whatever normal is.
But in terms of, it happening when you're a child, because the brain is not developed the way it is at 30,
right?
It's still just as effective.
Yeah. It seems to work across the board. It doesn't matter. In fact, I wrote a paper on that.
Okay.
So we looked at 22 different types of trauma. Military trauma, sexual abuse trauma, whatever. It works across all of that.
And you don't see a disparity between sexual, physical, military, like the incidence of efficacy isn't higher in one?
It's a little bit higher in military personnel.
Okay.
Efficacy seems to be a little bit higher.
Do you have a percentage that you could put on those three, say sexual, physical, and military?
You mean outcome?
Yeah.
Oh, it seems to work across the board.
Yeah.
What the way we define success, let's talk about definition of success. So PCL, PTSD checklist, is a classic definition. So in order to have significant successful outcome for whatever the intervention, it has to be 10 units. So average number of outcome in the military, the drop is 28 points. For civilians, it's like 22 points.
Okay.
But it still works,
Yeah.
is the point.
In terms of length of efficacy, do you notice a difference between any of the categories? Or is there an average of how long it lasts?
We're trying to get that data. It's pretty hard to get. A lot of times in the military, it seems to work longer because a lot of times in the military, it's a cohesive group of people.
And their mindset's different.
Mindset is different. And also, just a little improvement, and they're fine.
Yeah.
It's like rub some dirt in it, and I'm moving on.
Yeah, walk it off.
Yeah, walk it off. It's like, hold on, your leg is pointing the wrong way. I don't care.
Yeah.
Moving along.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. The procedure itself, now you're using ultrasound, so you can pinpoint it exactly. It takes 30 minutes, is that?
No. It takes me 5 minutes to do it.
5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it painful for most people?
I don't feel it.
Yeah. You've had it done?
I've got it done, but no, I was asleep for that.
Gotcha.
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Whenever people, is it going to hurt? As an injectionist, I'm not going to feel it. I'm good. So basically, let me just walk you through the procedure. Yeah. So patient lies on the table. If people want to go to sleep, we can do that. If not, we can do that. It doesn't matter. So we numb up the skin in 2 spots. And then we place the needle under ultrasound. So that burns a little bit. I think this procedure hurts less than dental procedures for sure. Yeah. And then, so the ultrasound shows me a couple of things. It shows me where the bones are. More importantly, it shows me where the blood vessels are. You do not want to hit a blood vessel.
Yeah.
You do not want to inject in a blood vessel.
Yeah.
But I want to give you kind of an interesting historical point. So I had a patient who was a sniper. So he was in my regular practice. I took care of his back, blah, blah, blah. He comes in with his wife, and they're both crying. The guy says, I'm going to kill myself. Horrible. I try to put him in the hospital, and he says, no. I was like, he's supposed to be in the hospital. That's what the book says. Whatever. He says, so he talks me into it, kind of shade me into a little bit. Anyway, so I do the block, and it doesn't work. I'm looking at 40 minutes later. I was like, I'm still going to go home, kill myself. I was like, at that point, I needed change my underwear. And then, so before I got into PTSD ward, I was invited to lecture in Norway. So I learned to do this procedure, C3 block, which is higher up. So I took this guy because I felt like he's going to go home and kill himself. A sniper probably would know how to do it. Yeah. So we take the guy back to the operating room. 40 minutes later, we do higher procedure, higher level. As he comes out of the operating room, he says, I'm feeling great, Doug. Gives me a high five. We found in 5 years he was fine.
Oh, wow. So the effects are immediate.
In many people, not in everybody. About 50% is immediate.
Yeah. So let's say it's something where, I don't know that, like, say, the fear of needles, that's not necessarily a PTSD thing unless somebody has a super traumatic experience, or is it? If you had things that scared the shit out of you, getting shots or whatever as a kid, and now as an adult, it's like this over imagination and this fear for needles, would that fix that? Like if you have a traumatic response.
I see what you're asking. Yeah. So maybe. So if you go back to the people who did the T2 clipping, they did it for agoraphobia and anxiety. So there was a paper, again, not by me, that Stellate works on 50% of anxiety people.
Oh,
so
okay.
potentially, yes, because it's physiologic, right?
Right.
You're sitting there, and all of a sudden your heart starts to beat, you're hyperventilating, you're looking around. That's because your sympathetic trigger was triggered.
Yeah.
So if you can calm that down, you'll go, okay, spider, I don't care.
Yeah, okay. If it's something where, let's say it's a childhood trauma, and whether it's sexual, physical, what have you, how would you gauge success in that regard? Like if, or from an immediate standpoint, like how would they know if it worked or not?
Fair enough. So, I've taken care of a number of children. So we can go as young as 10 years old. And then, so we had one which was been through hell and back. So 12 years old, we did the block, and she said, her mother called me and said, the feeling of doom is gone, like that.
Oh.
And then child and non-child, like I did an 8-year-old kid last week, and he said, I feel much more calm.
Wow.
He's 8, and he was like, went through a bunch of foster homes, all of that.
Yeah.
But when people go, well, I don't know if it worked, I'm not sure. Well, how about this? Think about whatever brought you here, whatever the worst thing you can remember. So if you do it before the procedure, they go, yeah, I feel it in my chest, I'm hyperventilating, I have all those horrible memories, right? After the block, they go, I can't get myself pissed off. What the hell?
Yeah.
I feel calm.
Yeah.
It's like Jason, the guy I was telling you about who shot a kid, he said before, I had to look everywhere because there is so much IEDs and so many snipers. I had to look at everything. Now I was like, I was going 100 miles per hour. Now I'm 20.
Wow. That's fascinating.
But it's like this, which is really interesting.
Yeah. For the procedure, you said some people opt to be under while it happens.
Yeah.
What do you use to put them under?
It depends. Depends on the age. Which, like the kid I was talking about, we do the full propofol. And then for adults, we use Versed.
Oh, okay.
But usually they're okay with that.
Yeah.
That's like a benzodiazepine. It's like Valium.
Oh, okay. The same stuff they'd use like in a dental procedure if they want to knock you out for it.
With dentists, depends what they do. Some of them use nitrous, which we're not going to use.
But so the stuff you're using is IV?
IV. Yeah, we give IV.
Yeah, okay.
But for little kids, we have an anesthesiologist to give like real anesthetic.
Full treatment.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Vietnam guy that had 50 years of living with
misery.
I'm assuming that entire 50-year period, his brain has been surrounded by the CSF that's poisoned or riddled with norepinephrine.
Soaked in it, yes.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden that's gone, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you tried or is there a difference if you did a brain scan, MRI, when it's surrounded by that and now it's not surrounded? Is there a big difference in brain activity and how it looks? I'm
going to give 3 answers to that.
Maybe, yes, and no.
You forgot my favorite one, maybe.
It depends.
No. That's a very specific question. So in 2015, Dr. Alkire, who is a professor of anesthesia in Long Beach, California, VA, did a study using PET scans. So PET scan is basically a glucose labeled with a nuclear substance.
Yeah.
And then what they did is they injected it, and people had the worst PTSD they could find in that VA. And they did the scan. The amygdala was activated. After the block, 2 days later, they checked it again. And I found the amygdala was deactivated. So there was an amazing lady, and man, so they're on the foundation. Glenn and Linda Greenberg. So they donated money to NYU to do the study that needs to be done. So I've been trying to get the VA to do that study for years.
Okay.
But of course, they wouldn't put money into it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's about halfway through now, and they're using functional MRI before and after. So we're going to have that answer, I think, in about 4 or 5 months. We may see they're halfway through the study, but it's looking pretty good right now.
Like there is a difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think my point is you can actually see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the thing I'm working on, by the way, is everybody talks about need for treatment of PTSD, right? Very few people talking about diagnosis of PTSD. So the current therapeutics is you fill out a PCL-5. So it's 30 questions. If you want to appear that you have no PTSD, put all the zeros. If you want to have severe PTSD, put all the 5s. So PTSD people come in 3 varieties. They have PTSD and they say, I have PTSD. Okay, we treat you. Then you have people who don't have PTSD and they say, I have PTSD. They just want money. It's $2,000 a month for next 50, 70 years. Okay. But number 3, the scariest one is one they say, I don't have PTSD, and they do. And that's the one that kill themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm actually working, a mutual friend and I are working on a first mental vital sign. So imagine the day where you come to the doctor's office, you have your blood pressure checked, your heart rate checked, right, respiration, and then let's say in a 10-minute evaluation, you will have a score, high PTSD score or low PTSD score, and high or low suicide score.
Oh, wow.
You can predict who's going to kill themselves based physiologically. Because right now, I used to be an ER doc. It's like, are you suicidal? No. Okay, great, go home.
Yeah.
My mother saw her psychiatrist the day before she killed herself.
Oh, wow. And that's done via brain scan. You can be able.
No, it's using physiologic responses.
Oh, okay. What are they?
It's a secret.
All right.
But I can tell you more about it later.
Yeah, all right.
But yeah, my point is, it's something we're working on right now. We actually have a machine now. We're testing it now.
Yeah.
That's my dream.
Yeah.
Because if you can reduce suicide by a significant number, that's great. But let's say this machine tells you, again, I'll give you a clue. It works on fight and flight nerves.
Okay.
Because that's a part of psychiatry, neuropsychiatry I really understand well.
Yeah.
But think of that. So right now, let's say you do this machine and you tell SOF person or regular person, we know you have PTSD. We know you're suicidal. Let us help you.
Yeah.
That's a very different story. It's like if I take an x-ray and you just came back from the field and I see a fracture, are you going to say no to treating your leg?
Yeah. Especially if you're like, no, my leg's not broken. You can be like, yes, it is.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then now, if let's say I have that information in my hand as a clinician,
Yeah.
what could I do about it, right?
Right.
So before, you put you in a hospital, you do a run around the rosy, and you come home. You leave the hospital, still kill yourself. That's not helpful.
Right.
So ketamine works 1 or 2 infusions, you feel markedly better. Stellate, we just published this, reduces suicidal ideation by 45%.
Oh, wow.
So if you do it like that, and its compliance is really high, it's like, well, take this medication for a while,
Yeah.
right? And then it may work for you. What is that?
Yeah. Well, and those medications generally are fucking your brain up in a lot of other ways, right? Like the SSRIs and stuff like that. Or
Well, the worst medications are atypical antipsychotics,
yeah.
like resveratrol. That leads to the increases chance of suicide by a factor of 3.
Wow.
So you're taking medication that potentially can lead to suicide.
What does it do to your brain?
Pickles it.
I mean, in what way? Like how does the mechanism work?
Frankly, I don't know. Nobody else does either. It's too complicated because people are thinking it just does something with dopamine. Dopamine receptors changes dopamine levels, serotonin levels, blah, blah, blah. I think they're wrong. I think it affects norepinephrine, fight and flight. Because like one of the drugs called Haldol, for example, I don't know if you've heard that drug.
I haven't.
It's antipsychotic. It's designed for schizophrenia. Okay. If you take enough of it, the blood pressure drops. It affects the fight and flight system of the brain also.
Okay.
But exactly which mechanism leads to suicides, I have not a clue.
Yeah. So would you classify kind of the typical SSRI and depression drugs in a similar category, just not as extreme, or what are your thoughts on them? And
You mean compared to atypical antipsychotics?
yeah.
Well, SSRI has been shown to a little bit help PTSD. They help depression a little bit. My mother was on tricyclic. I mean, it takes 6 weeks to 14 weeks for it to even start to kick in. So it's slow. And the response is not very strong usually. Ketamine is markedly more effective for that. Atypical antipsychotics were designed for schizophrenia, and there is really not a good study that's showing it. People use a lot of that because they don't know what else to do. What do you think the average number of different medications they take in the VA right now for mental health, for PTSD?
It's
What do you think? What number?
7, 9, I don't know.
12.
12. God, it's crazy.
Because you take this pill,
And it causes this.
this. Now you have to take that pill to oppose that.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of them, like if you think about atypical antipsychotics especially, those are the worst ones from my perspective. Because 1 out of 1,000 per year use, so 2 years, it's 2 out of 1,000, the heart stops.
Oh, wow.
Causes diabetes. It's all bad. I mean, and then when you take it, you become a zombie,
Yeah.
right? And also you gain weight and the equipment doesn't work. And men usually like to have the equipment working.
Yeah. You mentioned, ketamine has a lot of benefits. You mentioned some of the cons. Do opioids and pain medication fall into any of that category of helping with PTSD from a euphoria standpoint, or is that just a Band-Aid that does more harm than good? Or?
I think it's evil.
Yeah.
I mean, I've prescribed opioids for years. I don't anymore, really. But like using narcotics or opioids to treat PTSD, I think it's crazy. Because the first thing that goes away when you take opioids is euphoria. And then now you're addicted. On top of everything else, now you're addicted. Now you have to be a drug seeker, which is really not well received. Plus, if you take enough of it, you're going to die because it makes you stop breathing.
Yeah.
I think it has no place to play in this.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
I have a note in here also for dual sympathetic reset. Can you get into that?
Yeah, I was telling you about the sniper, remember?
Oh,
One
okay.
injection, second injection.
Okay,
what
so
I mean.
that's the combination.
Together it works better.
I got you. Okay.
And then one thing we did find is kind of interesting. So I started on the right side. Very early on, I tried the left and it didn't seem to work. So it turns out all trauma sits on the right side. But if somebody has pediatric trauma and adult trauma, it sits on the left and right side. So we did the right side and it fails. A lot of time those guys have pediatric trauma, so I have to go back and do the left side.
And so in those cases, you'll do both sides.
Not the same day, but
Okay.
yeah.
Is there a concern? Like there's a reason you don't do both sides on the same day?
Correct. So when you do the injection, so in about 5 to 7% of the time, there is a nerve that right next to it. It's called recurrent laryngeal nerve. So if you look at the vocal cords, there are 2 of them. So if you knock out one, the vocal cord goes in the midline. Other one still works. If you knock out both, then you can't breathe.
Oh, wow.
The only way. So when somebody says, "Oh, we'll do both today,"
Stay away from them.
yeah, I mean there is a way to do it safely,
Yeah.
but you have to be very, very careful. The point is, if that happens,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to go home that day.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So one of the things you brought up was that, the relationship between PTSD, PTSI, and sexual dysfunction, especially in the guys that you've worked with and kind of that relationship. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so the reason I got interested in that aspect of it, there was, I think he was a SEAL, and I think it was Luke, as I recall. Anyway, so he was treated by somebody else, not me. And at the end of this YouTube, he said, yeah, it's my hypervigilance is better. But the best part of the stellate was my sexual function came back. I was reading and I was like, okay, that's interesting. I never thought of that. So I did some digging. Turns out up to 85% of men with PTSD have sexual dysfunction, which is a significant number, obviously, and that leads to a lot of problems. First of all, I think sexual function speaks for itself, cohesiveness of the family. So the way I explain it to the guys now is that it's physiologic. If you're running from the tiger, you don't want anything sticking out.
Yeah.
It's kind of simplest way to describe it. So back to the norepinephrine. So if there was a study done that if somebody has low norepinephrine level, there is no sexual interest. If there is an optimal amount, then there is a lot of sexual interest. Like people go into battle, they come back, they have a lot of interest in sex. But if there's too much, there's no sexual interest again. So if you can reverse that, then sexual function comes back.
Is there any concern of lowering it too much to maintaining the same problem just from the other side of it? Like if you lower the norepinephrine too much, you'd have the same problem. So
I haven't studied it, but we've only had either no change or there's a change to it.
Yeah. So it is possible in the no change that you've lowered it too much. Theoretically. Maybe.
Theoretically. I mean, again, to study that, you need to suck out the fluid around the brain, and most people don't like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that made me think, one of the things I was thinking of earlier while you were talking that I wanted to ask about is, back not that long ago, lobotomies were an acceptable procedure. Obviously, I mean, is that something that you ever looked into, or like even
lobotomy?
Even from I'm glad we don't do that now because here's what it does. Like what was the thought process back then of using that to treat the problems that they treated with? Yeah,
actually, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, there's a great book I read, which was very spooky. It was called Desperate Cures. So they look at the history for the last 200 years. So psychiatry has really tried to come up with therapeutics. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. So let me give you an answer to that, and I'll give you another one before that, which was even scarier. So the idea behind it is they had violent, psychiatrically disturbed people, like schizophrenic, let's say, who are aggressive. And the guy who started it basically would put, I think he was an ENT surgeon or something like that. He was not a neurosurgeon. And he was use an ice pick through the nose and basically destroy part of the brain. And then become vegetables. So, I mean, that was the whole concept. He got a Nobel Prize for that at 1940s.
Man.
So the last time it was done was 1970s.
Yeah.
So now we can do it chemically. Now you can walk around.
Yeah.
But before that, it was interesting. So they had surgical psychiatry, I think they called it. So the whole concept was if somebody has fever, they start hallucinate. So they thought, well, the logic goes, if that's true, then some kind of infection is causing mental dysfunction. So if somebody doesn't have a fever, but they're depressed, let's say, then you need to go look for subclinical infection. Where could that be? Two places, teeth and colon. So the guy who invented it took out the teeth of his son. His depression never got better. And they would take out colons for like 15 years. Fatality rate is 50%.
Wow.
And they were still doing it.
They're
that was
still
nuts.
doing it.
No, they're not doing it now, but they were still doing it for
it.
15 years. People dying from taking the colons out.
Man.
Isn't that crazy?
Makes me not want to go to the doctor.
It's gotten a little better.
Well, yeah, a little bit.
Just a smidge.
Yeah, still problems, but all right. So I guess is there anything that you wanted to mention dovetailing onto the sexual dysfunction improvements that you've seen? Is there any?
Yeah. So that actually dovetails beautifully with secondary PTSD. So when I'm sure you heard this thing, then when the forces, when soldiers go to war or other part of the military, the whole family goes to war, right? So they call it secondary PTSD, at least that's the technical term. So you can think of PTSD as infective agent. In fact, we have our mutual acquaintance, Lauren, and I writing a book, and we have a great picture in there. A guy is standing there, and mosquitoes are flying everywhere, and he has PTSD in them, and then infecting everybody. So when we treat SOF families, we treat the guys, the women typically, and the kids, because if you don't treat all of them, it's like STD, it can come back.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow. So you do the SGB for all of them?
Yes.
Wow. Has there been, or are you aware of any use of SGB for rape victims? Like if they have that as a traumatic experience? Because to me, that would be like kind of a two-part problem. Is there's the trauma of it actually happening, but then there's the sexual association with that of never wanting to have sex again. Is that something that's been used in that same fashion? That's
I've treated tons of people like that.
And it has the same positive impact?
Yeah, because, well, if you think about it, what happens, I mean, typically a sexual trauma like that is in women. Not only women. So 1 out of 3 women are sexually attacked in our country, which is
crazy,
a huge number. And about 1 out of 35%, 1 out of 35, there's a sexual attack on men. But it seems to work across the board, because if you think about it, unless there is a horrible damage in sexual area, that part works normally. But if you can relax, then everything is going to work well for men and women.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's interesting. It's also, there is implications for, there was a study done in Italy where they found that Stellate-Ganglion Block increased fertility.
Really?
Because if you think about it, you probably have heard of, people are trying to get pregnant and then they get a dog and then they get pregnant.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Why? Because they're relaxed.
Yeah.
They have something else to work with.
Yeah.
We had the cutest story I have to tell you about this. So we had this guy came in. He was a firefighter. I forgot where he was from. So we treated him. He did great. And he calls me back 2 years later. He said, "Hey, doc, my wife and I had a kid." I said, "No, that's great." He said, "No, you don't understand. We've been trying for 20 years. And then we conceived the day after the procedure."
Wow.
I said, "Okay, that kind of makes sense because sexual function improved." Guess what they named the baby? Take one guess.
Eugene.
Nope. Better as a girl, so it would have been ugly.
Ah,
no.
Jeannie.
Jordan.
Oh, really?
Michael Jordan.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I called it our first SGB baby.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, so, I mean, do you know the mechanism behind, obviously the sexual function is better, but that it actually increases like sperm motility and
so let me give you a thought. Well, in women, it's very clear what it does. So women who a lot of times having difficulty conceiving, they have spotting, which is they have intermittent periods. That's because the fight and flight nerves are squeezing the blood vessels, lining of the endometrium, it's called, or lining of the uterus. So if you can synchronize it, then they can build up to better thickness and then better implantation. That's straightforward. In male thing, first of all, there is better erection because of better blood flow and all the hormones are working better. But the other part is, what's interesting is, as my assumption, I do not know this for a fact, nor am I going to be asking that anytime soon. So if people are more relaxed, both men and women, there is more chance of orgasm.
Okay.
What's interesting is orgasm increases the chance of fertility significantly because it's like a suction pump. It's designed to suck everything back up to the eggs. So I assume that's what happened.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, because, if you think about it, if it's somebody has foreplay, they relax, everything is smooth, everything works better.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Yeah, no, that's pretty logical. If you could go into the God Shot book,
Sure.
as well as the Stella Center and kind of how you've culminated this procedure into those two areas.
Sure. So the God Shot was a term that actually was introduced to me I was treating a bunch of Marines, and one of the Marines said, it's like people in my unit call it God Shot because it changes lives. And I thought, what an amazing name.
Yeah.
So then there was a Playboy article written about it, which is the funniest thing in the world to me, in 2016. Matt Farwell, he was a lieutenant Army, and that was the name of the article. It was called The God Shot. So he described his experience of how it worked. And that's why we like the term. So I got connected with Lauren, who is an amazing writer, because she's written a number of books with Special Forces people, SOF. And then I still love working with her. So we're writing a book now. I think it's going to be an amazing book. If you want to sign up to get early version of it, I think the cover is great. You can look at that, thegodshotbook.com. And then when it's out, you'll actually get it. But there's going to be a bunch of illustrations in it.
Oh, nice.
Which is going to be great, I think. So like we have, there is a chapter about the brain mechanic. So you can see the skull moved off, and then you can see the engine kind of moving inside. We have the pictures of secondary PTSD, the mosquitoes I was telling you about. And we have also like a picture of a bunch of other, like one of the things, the way I see PTSD is like you have gas pedal depressed and brake. And then, because the gas pedal is what PTSD is, right? So we had one of my friends who treated a patient with severe PTSD. He was also a SEAL. He had to go inside the bunkers in Iraq War #1. And I think he had 20, 30 kills, something like that. Pretty severe PTSD. Anyway, so he has the block. Does great. He gets into car accident because he fell asleep.
Because he was too relaxed.
Too relaxed. So the point is, the gas pedal was off, but the brake was still on.
Yeah.
So our chapter has a picture of this roadster, and you have the engine bellowing fire, and you have smoke coming out of the brake.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. It's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, that's neat. And then the Stella Center.
So Stella Center, so basically it was fascinating how that came about. So I took care of a gentleman, and he was high power rescue from Marines. So his friend, I used to know him from physical therapy years prior. So he says, you really need to get this available. This is an amazing opportunity. And I said, yeah, great idea, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so one way or another, he introduced me to this high-power investment firm, and I met with them, and they said, this is a really great idea. So we connected with them, and it's called Stella Center now. We are international. We have one site in Israel, 4 sites in Australia, I think 20 sites in United States. And the idea is to bring appropriate therapeutics to people because, Stellate-Ganglion Block is a simple procedure, but if you don't do it right, it can go wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm a CMO, Chief Medical Officer of that, and then so I want to make sure it's done correctly. We're also doing research, we're publishing papers. So, trying to bring it to the right people, and we're trying to also change the narrative of PTSD, which kind of brings us to PTSI terminology. But, that's how it came about. And the worst part about this whole story, the guy who introduced me, his name was Sean, he killed himself right before we started.
Oh, wow.
Which was totally out of the blue. We got everything we were trying to do, and he died right before that.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, he was like 35.
Wow.
Terrible.
Do you know what the circumstances were? Or?
I don't know. There's like 1,000 people in the church celebrating his life. I don't know.
Yeah. Did he have PTS and?
Yeah, he must have.
Yeah. Did he not have the procedure done?
No.
Really? It seems odd. Him of all people would have had it done. But,
yeah.
Wow, that's
weird.
Heartbreaking. Is SGB normally or typically covered by insurance, or is it usually?
No.
Yeah. What does it cost to have it done?
I think we charge about $1,500 per side right now.
So for one side, right?
Right. So we do, if it's 2 sides, I think it's like $2,600, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. And you said there's 20 locations here in the United States.
Something like that.
Yeah. And you've, being the CMO of that, do you visit all of them? Do you manage the people who are doing it? Do you put them
manage
through
them.
training?
They come in and they train with me. And some people are already very well trained.
Yeah.
So before we even sign them up, they have to show me competence.
Yeah.
if they're not competent, we're not going to take them on.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. When does the book come out?
We are actually cranking along. So we will be done with the book, I think, in 4 months. We have an amazing agent now. So I don't know, but what I'm trying to do is get as many people to sign up, and I think it'll be good for us publishing-wise. I mean, I've never done that aspect of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably 6 months to a year. But there's going to be, we're going to put some chapters on, I think.
Yeah.
So people can look at it. But
yeah.
I have not been so excited about a book ever.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. I have a bunch of Patreon questions, which are always good. My Patreon members for the show always have a lot of good insight and really good questions to add. Several members asked, what are your thoughts on the use of psychedelics for PTSD, the DMT, ibogaine, ayahuasca type stuff?
Well, first of all, I have a chapter in the book, actually, about that. First of all, you have to remember they're not all the same. So I think psilocybin is the safest of all of them. I think it works well for a lot of things. Ibogaine, I think, has a lot of potential, but it can affect the heart. So the heart
permanently, or
you can die from it.
I mean, if that doesn't happen, can it damage it permanently?
It doesn't damage it. It just changes QT intervals, so it can give you arrhythmia. It doesn't damage it per se. But there is a study being done, I think, in Stanford right now. So the key point is to give magnesium. If you're going to have it done, make sure it's not in the cave somewhere.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Get it done where people can. It's not going to kill you if they can figure out there is a problem and treat you.
Right.
But if you're in the cave,
yeah.
Right now it's not legal, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, psilocybin. I personally did a psilocybin trip. It was interesting, but I don't think it did anything for me.
Yeah. Ayahuasca?
Maybe. I'm not I don't know. This has a possible downside. I've heard some really bad trips.
I guess what are the concerns downside-wise?
Well, some people have a really nasty trip, and they can damage them further. It depends where you're involved in. It depends if you're surrounded by competent people, because you're vulnerable. Yeah. If you're vulnerable, there have been reports people walking off a mountain, right? I mean, because if you need to make sure you're with a solid group of people.
Yeah.
And
or that could take advantage of you.
Yeah, in all type of different ways.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's...
Like trust has to be
and it has to be in the right environment. For example, the way I did it was the native way of doing it. A lot of people carrying on and screaming. That's not the way. It needs to be calm, peaceful. I think the future, at least near future, you're going to have psilocybin is going to do great. I think LSD is going to do great. Ayahuasca, maybe. Ibogaine really has shown a lot of promise for addiction. And TBI, actually, it's interesting. But again, it needs to be monitored. I'm an anesthesiologist. I'm used to monitor everything.
Yeah.
But the point is, some of those drugs can make your heart can go cuckoo, and you don't want to do it in a cave.
Yeah. One thing that you touched on earlier that I want to come back to is what you do after the treatment.
You mean aftercare?
Yeah. I'm curious, and one of the questions gets into it a little bit, but you mentioned meditation, but I'm curious how big of a role nutrition, lifestyle choices, stress, exercise, sunlight, like doing all of the things that you should be doing anyway. How big of a role does taking that kind of to the next level and being really, really diligent on that kind of stuff in terms of it helping the efficacy last longer or be more effective?
I think all of it would be helpful. The question is, how much science do we have behind it? Meditation's been shown to regrow brain tissue back, which is pretty clear. It's a great advantage.
Yeah.
I think talking to therapists, what we find is after the block, the therapy becomes much more effective.
Yeah.
Because people don't get as hyped up. They have access to their emotion. They have access to their memory. They have access to themselves. They're finding themselves, which is great.
Yeah.
Reducing stress is obvious.
Yeah.
Like the guy I was talking about, the policeman. Obviously, you want to minimize the stress, but if something bad happens, it happens. Yeah. The other big question is SOF. People ask me all the time, so I'm surprised you haven't asked me. Is it going to make me a wuss?
Well,
That's
to me,
a very common question.
Yeah, to me, just thinking of I think if I didn't understand, or if you hadn't done such a good job explaining the mechanism with which how it works, maybe I would have asked that. But
Yeah. But I'll tell you what we found is in active special forces, a lot of them have survived battles because they had stellates.
Yeah.
Because instead of being frenetic, they're now laser.
Yeah.
You want to be laser. If you're holding a 50 cal in your hand, you probably should be focusing what you're doing instead of trying to spray everything.
Yeah.
Spray and pray is not a good plan.
Well, unless you're a gangbanger, then maybe. But
exactly.
Do you know how many SOF members have had this done?
Ooh, a lot. I'll give you some
Hundreds or
guesses.
thousands?
Thousands.
Wow.
And so Bragg has probably done 2,000 to 3,000 so far, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Lenchheim, I think they've done both SOF and non-SOF. Tripler has done, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000, and some of them was SOF. I personally have done probably 80 SOF, Canada, probably 500 US, give or take.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
so
thousands.
Yeah, thousands.
Well, Green Beret,
Yeah.
right? It's like Bragg or Fort Freedom. They've been doing it for years there.
Yeah. Jason asks about plant-based medicines, specifically psilocybin for depression and PTSD, which you talked about. But his follow-on question is, how resistant do you think Big Pharma will be to the use of psychedelics, and do you think that will prohibit or get in the way of more mainstream use?
That's a tremendous question. Well, this is just purely by conjecture. I'm not an expert in that. I think if a pharma can figure out how to make money off it,
then it'll be huge.
It'll be huge. Well, look at ketamine.
Yeah.
So there's a nasal ketamine now.
Yeah.
Right? It's Spravato. It's covered.
Does it work as well as the injections?
The science says no, but
what do you think?
I think IV ketamine is better.
Yeah. Does the nasal spray work? It just not
it does
as
work.
well?
Yeah. It does work.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen it work.
Yeah.
But it's also the other part that's, since it's covered, people have more access to it. It's certainly much better than nothing.
Yeah. Well, there's oral too, right?
I wouldn't do that. Yeah. There is lozenges. I assume you're talking about lozenges.
Yeah.
It's like you need to put it under the tongue to absorb it. That gets very spunky. And, the problem, I think it needs to be controlled, or either we get it under control or somebody will get control for us. So the lozenges, I've met patients who had 2 months of lozenges sent to them at home.
Oh, wow.
I wonder how can it go wrong, right?
Yeah.
Terry, the actor, I think had lozenges.
Oh, really? Wow. Is there as big a concern with ketamine from an addiction and abuse standpoint as there is, say, opioids?
That's an amazing question. So opioids, I know a lot about it because I've been in that space forever. I think it's different. So I think if it's done correctly, I think the addiction is not high. Like, I don't think there is any evidence of somebody getting intranasal or intravenous ketamine leading to addiction. But equally, there's plenty of addicts who like to use it in the street, and it's getting easier and easier to get, which I think they need to tighten that up. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did. I guess I'm curious. I've never used it or taken it, so I guess I'm just curious. Do you have to take a higher than normal prescribed amount to get the euphoria or the high that they're chasing, or what? Why is it being used, I guess, if it's...
why do people use it?
Yeah, if there's a much lower incidence of addiction, because, like, if you're in the hospital after a surgery and they hit you with fentanyl, like, right away, like, holy shit, like, I feel like I'm on top of the world, so...
you do the same.
It's the same.
Ketamine is the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, my God.
I didn't realize it was the same.
Well, I think people don't talk about, but ketamine is 10 times stronger than morphine, pain-wise. So if you think about it, when I used to do burn surgery, so we would do an injection of ketamine and be able to slice that skin off. And that hurts. It doesn't hurt. Wow. And it's just, so they're like, okay, everything is good. All right, you're breathing my skin. Okay. And it doesn't hurt. Wow. I've done open heart surgery with just pure ketamine.
Really?
It's a very strong analgesic.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Man, that's impressive.
Yeah. It's a great drug. I just hope it doesn't fall into disuse.
Yeah. Darby asks, is it ultimately a person's resilience or coping skills that determines the magnitude of impacts from PTSD?
Interesting question. So if somebody is resilient, will PTSD affect them more? Is that the question, you think?
Well, so here's how I guess I get.
Tell me how you interpret it.
Is somebody's ability to be resilient, or their coping mechanisms to deal with stress, is how good they are at that. What determines the magnitude of the impact from PTSD? Like, is it?
No, I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you the reason. A lot of times, coping mechanism is denial, right? Or they drink like crazy, and they take So people say, well, you have an alcohol abuse disorder, right? So I call it, you're just taking your trouble for a swim. You're just trying to feel better for that 1 minute.
Yeah.
So it depends there's healthy coping, non-healthy coping. But I think if you can take the foot off the gas, your coping mechanism will become much more effective. Yeah. There's also some very bad coping mechanism, right? Sexual addiction. Let's say you chase everything around. That's not really great coping, but it's a coping mechanism. So to me, if you calm down the system, then everything else works much better.
Yeah. I suppose again, kind of what I'm gathering from this question, in addition to what you already mentioned, take the soft guys, that their attitudes, their ability to deal with stress and things like that's obviously playing a significant role in their ability to heal from PTSD versus somebody who allows it to be more of an excuse and plays the victim mentality. That does play a role.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. Yeah. It's huge. And the other part is, the thing I love about SOF is that there's a whole camaraderie.
Yeah.
They will help each other and will support each other. Also, I've had one of the guys from Canada called me up and it's like, never met me before. He said, my guy is going to die from alcohol use. Can I just drive him over? So he drove straight from Toronto. We treated him. He did great.
Oh, wow. Just like that, huh?
just like that. What's interesting, there is no withdrawals and no DTs.
Yeah.
So we just wrote, my student and I just put together this paper, which we're going to be presenting at ASRA, which is American Society of Regional Anesthesia, the mechanism why, if you do a stellate, because when you stop drinking, right, people get DTs. You probably heard that. Mm-mm. So when people drink a lot, when you stop suddenly, a large percentage of people will start to have seizures and they die.
Oh, wow. Is it the same with hard drugs? Or
each drug is different, right? So if you take Valium a lot and you stop, you can die from that. Benzos will kill you. Opioids will not kill you. You'll feel miserable. You feel like dying, but it won't kill you. Because you have seizures.
With the opioids?
No. Oh. From benzos, like Valium, or alcohol. Alcohol, if you stop suddenly, a lot of people will die.
Why is that? Do you
know?
They
hallucinate, yeah. So the receptors are used to it. So there's a whole complicated reasons, like, there's GABA B receptors, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is when you take it away, the drug that prevents seizures work on similar receptors.
Oh, okay.
So if you think about it, so the body is used to those receptors, and now you're no longer drinking alcohol. So the signs are hallucinate and seize.
Wow. So those receptors in alcohol and benzos are not the same receptors in opioids?
Totally different.
Okay.
Those are the mu's. Yeah. So the opioids are mu's, other ones are different.
Okay.
GABA.
Does an SGB, does that have an impact in a positive manner with withdrawals from opioids?
I haven't really seen that. I don't know.
Yeah. Is it possible?
I've seen it with alcohol for sure.
Yeah.
Possible, yeah. Because, part of it, if you think about it, one of the way you treat that is you give them clonidine. Clonidine reduces fight and flight system. It's a drug. Mm-hmm. Stellate reduces that. So theoretically it will. I've never really had a chance to study it.
What was the drug?
Clonidine.
They give that for withdrawals? Okay.
That's the most common use for withdrawals and PTSD.
Yeah. And it's effective for both. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your thoughts on post-traumatic stress? This is Claire asking. Thoughts on post-traumatic stress being a Band-Aid for so many stressor circumstances? So kind of using that as an excuse. And she's asking, should there be a categorization, possibly degrees or more specificity, i.e. combat trauma, childhood trauma, sexual trauma, et cetera?
So segregation, basically. So, well, that's a great entryway into one of my favorite topics, PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury. So I have combined forces with Frank Egbert. He was a very famous psychiatrist. He came up with, I'll give you a direct answer. So he came up with the term Stockholm Syndrome. So he's been around a long time. He's now 87 years old. So he believes PTSD term is stigmatizing, which kind of is partly what you're asking. And then he believed the term should be changed to PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, meaning there's a biological change in the brain. So the term PTSD was started, actually, he was one of the 6 people who started that term in 1980, but science has moved along. So now we know there's a brain change. When people say PTSD is an invisible wound, which I'm sure you heard. Mm-hmm. So my answer to that is invisible wound if you have the wrong scanner. If you have the right scanner, you can actually see the wound being amygdala overactivation and things like that. And at least one study that showed that you can reverse it using Stellate, which kind of makes sense. So if the name, so the history of that is Dr. Frank Egbert went to American Psychiatric Association, who defines those terms, and Peter Shirelli. Have you ever met that man?
I haven't. I've heard of him.
Yeah, so Peter was a 4-star who was placed in charge of suicide prevention by the Army in 2013. So Peter Shirelli, a line officer, and Frank Egbert went to American Psychiatric Association and said, change the name. And they go, no, we're not going to change the name. They said, because it causes stigma. And they go, it doesn't. that was a great argument.
Why not?
Right?
Because it doesn't.
And yeah, and Pete said that he talked to his guys and said they're killing themselves, and they felt if he can change that, they will reduce the stigma and they'll survive. Still wasn't enough. So Frank now is getting old, and he kind of handed me this hot potato. So in 2023, I published a study where we did 4,000 people. We asked them a question: if you change the name PTSD to PTSI, will it make a difference? And they said, yes, we will change. It'll reduce stigma, stuff like that. So I took that information, I presented it at the American Psychiatric Association, and then there is a very formal way to request a name change. And the way to do it, you need to send them the reason why you want to change the name change. And the main reason is, if you could show it causes harm, then we'll change the name. So I send them everything, and they go, no.
Really? I mean, to me, it's pretty straightforward.
It is.
The stigma with a disorder versus an injury is massive. There's a huge difference.
Because you have a brain. But besides that, I'm a little annoyed. But let me give you the history, though. So the name have been changed recently. Not PTSD name. But, for example, learning disability was a name in DSM-4, and they changed them to learning differences in DSM-5 because it causes stigma. There's many more people with PTSD than learning difference, learning disability.
Yeah.
So they just don't want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think any time you attach disorder to anything, there's going to be a negative connotation, obviously. But, I mean, I've seen a movement for just calling it PTS for a few years. But
I was there in Congress when I started that in 2010.
Yeah.
But My point to them, Filner, who started that, and I said, they're going to call it PMS.
Yeah.
I think that's just stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I love the train of thought and your approach towards calling it PTSI for both of those reasons. One, the stigma attached to it, but also, to me that lends itself to kind of looking at the bright side of saying it's an injury, it can be fixed.
It's fixable.
Yeah.
So let me give you the answer to your question now. So it was interesting. I was giving a speech in Pritzker Military Library in Chicago, and this veteran from Vietnam said, "I think military trauma is different than sexual trauma. And I said, first of all, I don't believe that's true. I'm totally opposed to that, and I'll give you a reason in a second. And I said, are you telling me your trauma, whatever you suffered through the war, and thank you for your service, is different or more intense than a woman that was chained to sink and raped for 10 years? Is that the debate you want to get into? He was not thrilled with me. I was not thrilled with him.
Yeah.
But if you look at that, to me, if you take the brain out of the skull and you don't have any input, there's no difference what caused the trauma. Sexual trauma, pediatric trauma, military trauma, it doesn't matter. The same part of the brain is affected. In fact, experimentally, if you cut amygdala out of the rat, you cannot give him PTSD.
Really?
It's not possible.
What does the amygdala do besides that? Like, has that ever been thought of as being a treatment for it, or?
Oh, no. You can't.
Catastrophic.
You lose all the emotion. That's another.
So a sociopath basically doesn't have an amygdala, or like a serial killer that has no empathy whatsoever. Is there a problem with their amygdala? Has that ever been studied?
No, there's many other parts. Amygdala, I don't think that's true. So to me, so if you look at, for example, let me tell you, in a rat study, so if you take a rat, the way you can give rat PTSD, there's a big technical term, but basically it's waterboarding a rat. You keep throwing the water, and once it gives up, it sinks and starts to drown. So if you fish those guys out, you do stellate on half, you throw them back in the water, the ones stellate swim out. So the point is, we know it works on animals.
Yeah.
Same is true for dogs. I only done 2 dogs so far. They both did great. But the point is, amygdala is a defensive action. So if antelope hears a click, they start running. They don't know why they're running, but they're running. It's basically an alarm section. I don't think a sociopath has abnormal amygdala. They have other part of the brain which is sick, but not that part. I think it's a different part.
Yeah.
So to give the direct answer to that, segregating PTSD into different sections, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. If you broke a leg, does it make a difference if there was a missile, a hammer, or a stone?
Right.
The leg is broken.
Yeah.
What's the treatment? A cast. What's the difference?
Yeah.
There's no difference.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with any of that. I think it makes great sense. Lisa asks, can PTSD apply to experiencing numerous deaths of a family and close friends together?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it can be from anything, really. I mean, wouldn't you say, I mean, provided that the system that you're coming up with to determine physiologically, yes, you have PTSD
right.
or not, I mean, really, that's going to be dependent on the person. Like, something that wouldn't cause PTSD in me very well may cause it in somebody else, and vice versa.
It depends on sensitivity. So there are certain people, which I'm sure you know, a lot of SOF guys, they've been through hell and back. They have no PTSD. Some people just don't have that. So there is something called peptide Y. I talked to a guy who was a psychiatrist who worked in special forces and CIA, and certain people just produce a natural substance that prevents them getting PTSD. What happens.
What is that natural substance?
I think it's called peptide Y.
Oh, okay. Does that neutralize norepinephrine? Am I saying that right? I feel like an idiot.
I think it affects, if you want to be hip, you can call it norepi.
Okay. That's easier for me to say.
Fancy, norepi. I think it neutralizes the effects of norepinephrine. It doesn't directly block it, but there are different receptors, and there's different crazy ways you can prevent PTSD and control it. For example, playing Tetris. that seems to reduce PTSD.
Like during those situations
Video
or
game.
afterwards?
Afterwards.
Really?
Or even the people, in fact, that's something I'm trying to develop is Tetris game so I can give it to people.
Has there been any studies in terms of what contributes to some human beings producing more of that peptide Y than others? Is it lifestyle? Is it genetics? Is it diet? Is it?
I think it's genetics.
Genetics.
Just certain people are just built that way.
Yeah.
And there is, he told me about it, that there is like segregation of two groups. Some people have high, some low, and a lot of those guys find themselves in SOF methods.
Yeah.
The question is, would childhood abuse lead to production of that?
Who knows?
I've never gotten into that.
Yeah.
I can't fix that part.
Yeah. So kind of in that same vein, Natalie asks, is there a way to prevent PTSD from happening in the first place? For example, is there a way we can teach our kids to believe or have specific conversations so that when they go through trauma, it doesn't stick around? I would add to that, is there an ability to create a synthetic peptide Y that people could take to, like, let's say you have an ability to make it, this guy's going into battle, we're going to give him extra peptide Y to make him more resilient. Is that even a possibility?
So there are a couple of answers to that. So first of all, there's limbic system is like, that's where amygdala lives, all the emotions live. Neocortex is where your thinking, all of that goes through. So there's, in a human, our neocortex is much bigger than, let's say, an antelope or a rat. But our limbic system is pretty much the same. So there's nothing you could train somebody like mental armor. People have tried that, right? They show him all that stuff. I think that's a ridiculous concept. So there's nothing you could tell somebody like,
suck it up, buttercup.
Oh, you're right. Suck it up, buttercup. Dirt some in it. Yeah, put some dirt in it. Yeah. Or, don't be sad. That's a very effective therapeutic maneuver, right? Just don't be sad. Snap out of it.
Yeah.
Some cultures,
you're addicted to drugs, just stop doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Only if I knew, or you hit him inside the head, it's going to knock out of it. It's like, that's not an effective therapy. Yeah. But theoretically, there is a drug I have been trying to get people to use. So the NGF, I think, is what's causing this PTSD formation. There is a drug that's actually available for something else that may be usable for that. So potentially, but I've never really gotten to that.
Yeah.
So potentially, there are drugs that can be used immediately afterwards.
Yeah. But as far as you know, nothing peptide Y-wise that you could use as a preventative?
I'm not aware of it.
Yeah. Is that something that, like, I guess from your knowledge, can you identify what peptide Y is? Like, do you have an ability to extract that from a person and know that it's there at a certain level?
It's one of those maybes. I don't know. I haven't looked into it, so I can't answer the question.
It seems like if you're talking, this is the entrepreneur, big pharma, big business side of my brain, I guess, and that would be a huge winning lottery ticket for a pharmaceutical company if they could figure out a way to make a synthetic peptide Y.
That's a maybe, but let me give you another option. So there is a drug now available that can reduce TBI significantly. The company's been around for 8 years. All it just is a nasal spray. You think everybody would embrace it already?
Yeah,
no, not so much.
Do you have any idea why?
I think our system of acquisition is faulty.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. There's more to that story.
Yeah.
So to Natalie's question, I agree in that it doesn't seem like just talking to them or having conversations, but I do wonder if from the childhood upbringing and even into young adulthood, if you create environments that produce eustress for people, that's just enough stress for them to struggle just enough to where they can still overcome it and gain confidence and be more resilient.
Agreed.
You would recommend that?
Oh, 100%. So I think if you look at most cultures, most successful cultures, and I'm starting to doubt if our successful culture, there is a rite of passage. Everybody needs to have a rite of passage. In our culture, what is our rite of passage? How fast you can play a video game, That's not the right path.
At this point, yeah, I don't know.
We don't have it.
Yeah. Not
We
as a
don't have it.
society. I think there are subsections. You know, there's military service, there's
Right.
MMA fighters.
But I'm talking about 14 years old.
Right.
You're not an MMA fighter at that age.
Yeah.
But look,
Well-
in most cultures in the past, like in old tribes, here is a bow and arrow. We'll see you in 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I know that the Spartans, you know,
Right.
they kicked young men out at even younger than that, and
Right.
and they either came back or were
they
removed
didn't.
from the gene pool. You know,
But now we are. I think people are over-coddled.
yeah,
The other thing is the video games are some of the more aggressive video games are evil. And I don't know if you know the history of the video games as far as getting soldiers to shoot more.
yeah.
So you know that story.
Well, I'll
It changes the brain.
Yeah, and I would say even on kind of a less technologically advanced note, back in, I don't remember what year they started doing it, but the difference in just for military soldiers, instead of shooting a circle, making silhouette targets. You know,
Right.
the difference in their ability to shoot other human beings now, because they're shooting at the silhouette of a human
Right.
as opposed to just a circle target, made a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
You know,
well,
but-
I think that was implemented because, from what I understand, again, you probably know better than I do. During World War II, 30% of people first faced the enemy was shooting at the enemy.
Yeah,
In Vietnam, it was up to 70%.
yeah. Well, and
That's part of it.
yeah, and Civil War and Revolutionary War similarly had even less. You know, especially in the Civil War, because it was countrymen against countrymen. There was, there's all these statistics. You're probably familiar with Colonel Rex Grossman's On Combat and On Killing work. He
I don't know that
wrote
one.
those two books and does a lot of seminars on talking about kind of the psychology of killing. And that was a big takeaway. It was during the Civil War. Is they found muskets with 7, 8, 9, 10 rounds jammed in the barrel, and they couldn't figure it out. And then it was
They don't want to do it.
they're basically, because back then the reloading process took forever, and so if they were, air quotes, reloading, then they didn't have to shoot anybody, and so guys would just pretend to be reloading for
makes sense.
20 minutes straight, so that they didn't have to point and shoot
It makes
anybody.
tremendous. By the way, do you know what PTSD was called during Civil War?
Shell shock, right? I guess that was World War II.
World War
probably.
One.
No,
No, battle fatigue was it was called soldier's heart.
soldier's heart.
Right, because they were describing a physiologic condition, right? They were fainty, they looked, their face was flat, the heart was beating, soldier's heart. Then it became shell shock.
Yeah.
Obviously there's a lot of stuff going on. Battle fatigue, then Vietnam syndrome, then PTSD.
Wow.
Used to be, what the Romans called it? The tremble.
Really? Wow, that's fascinating.
A few years ago now.
Yeah, it's been a
Nothing's
while.
changed,
Yeah,
same
I know.
thing.
Yeah. Pete says, what are your thoughts on the importance of a clean diet, sufficient rest, regular exercise, exposure to sunlight on combating PTSD, which we kind of already talked about? But
Well, I think so my mother had seasonal depression disorder. So
Chicago in the wintertime.
yeah, shocking, right?
Yeah.
So I highly recommend full spectrum light, unless you have like in Texas, you have plenty of light.
Yeah.
But full spectrum, I have mine going. Now it's already out. Everybody knows I'm going to be looking at it,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, they're all like clustering around. It's funny. I think sleep is hyper important. So exposure in that list, you should talk about putting away the electronics, because if you don't have the electronics on, you're going to produce melatonin. You're going to sleep better. Sleeping better. Actually, there are poisons that you produce during the day when you're thinking produce poisons. The only way to get it out of it is you need to be in deep sleep phase, which is your monitor and mine will tell us when deep sleep phase.
Stage 3 and 4, the deep REM
Stage
sleep.
4.
The REM sleep, right?
No.
Stage-
REM is very active. Stage 4 is deep sleep.
Okay, so 3 is REM and 4 is deep.
No, there are 5 stages.
Oh, okay.
1, 2, very light. 3, maybe. 4 is deep. 5 is REM.
Okay.
So when I use my EEG monitor to do meditation, if I fall asleep, you think when you're asleep, everything is fine. Oh no, my monitor goes crazy.
Yeah.
Because it's like, REM is like, you're very active in your mind during REM.
How accurate do you think the Oura rings and the Whoop straps are for actually being able to discern the stage of sleep?
Really, we've done a study with Whoop.
There's a reason you're wearing an Oura ring and not a Whoop strap. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I also have a Fitbit.
Yeah.
I got it all covered.
Double covered. Next, you're going to have an anal probe telling me something, right?
I don't know you that well yet.
maybe after.
Maybe later. But I really don't understand the algorithms and how I don't even know how they keep track of when you do a nap.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand this, but supposedly it works, and it does seem to be somewhat predictive.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I haven't been wearing this long. It's been a couple of months now, I think. But I do see a general correlation between if it says my sleep performance was, 85% or better, and my recovery is 85 or better, I absolutely feel better than when it's 35. So
that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's accurate enough, or it's somewhat accurate, But
it's good enough until something better comes along.
Yeah, it's fascinating for sure. I don't
HRV. Do you look at the HRV?
Oh yeah. And similarly, like when I'm better recovered, it's always higher, and I just feel better, But
so do you know what that HRV is?
The heart rate variability. I mean,
right. But where does it come from?
I don't know.
Let me help you. I'm not trying to pimp you. Yeah. So the guy who came up with it is Dr. Porges, Stephen Porges, brilliant man. I've met him years ago. He's an inspiration. So he's a Vegas guy. So Vegas is opposite to fight and flight. That's what calms you down, all of that. So when you take a deep breath and hold it, you're activating the vagus nerve. So if your vagus nerve is working normally, you're going to have a lot of variability between the heartbeats. And that means your fight and flight nerves are not as active. That's why the HRV is being monitored.
Okay.
That's the
so a good way to help raise your HRV would be to do breathing exercises. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And as far as diet, all those crazy ass drinks, like a lot of caffeine, 5-hour energy, all that stuff. First of all, I don't think that's healthy for you.
Yeah.
Chilling that down, I think is really important.
Yeah.
Taking the time to eat. A lot of people are doing fast food, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting things in what you eat there.
Yeah. Well, and I think the intentionality of when you're eating, like eating slow and being mindful of it makes a surprisingly big difference.
Yeah, instead of shoveling it in.
Yeah.
The other part that's, it can sound like woo-woo, but there's a whole science about killing animals in a compassionate way.
Yeah.
So if they're shoved into this and they're scared, they're producing cortisol, epinephrine, all those things you don't want in your body.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen similar stuff where there are some butchering outfits that even use snipers. Not very many of them, but so a cow's in a pasture eating, and they're like sniping at headshots.
So they don't even know it's there.
Yes, they have no idea what's coming. Which I don't know how practical that is. I also don't know you can fuck that up too.
Well, you can also come up with a gun and shoot the cow in the head. But I think there is I forgot the name of the woman who started all that, and there is a compassion the way to do it.
Temple Grandin.
Fast. Is that her?
Yeah, she she has a famous book called I think it's called Animals in Translation or something title like that. But fascinating stuff for sure. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
Great question. Let me look. I have a little list. Let's see if I have anything on the list. Aging and PTSD. So I started doing a study using, there is terminology people are starting to use is health span and lifespan. So lifespan is how long you live. Health span is how long you're healthy when you're alive. So the best way to analyze it is called epigenetic clocks. I don't know if you've heard that name. It's basically DNA changes. Without mutation, you can just actually change. So let's say my father's father passed down his DNA change to my dad, and he passed down to me. That may be more vulnerable to develop PTSD. So that's one aspect of epigenetics. The other one, if you look at 1,100 alleles, which is part of the DNA, through some complex computation, you can figure out who's going to die when. So it's called Harworth clock.
Really?
So the most accurate one is called Grim Age. If you're interested, you can look that into it. So the people who developed it are from UCLA. So I contacted them, and I wanted to do SOF study, shocking, see if you can reverse the aging, because the logic was, since the battle is so intense in SOF, you're going to age faster, which has been shown multiple times before. But there are other studies that show that if you can reverse the PTSD, you can reverse some of the biological aging. So it looks like that's what we're finding it.
Oh, wow.
I haven't published it yet.
Yeah.
But what's cool about it is you can actually measure it, right? So you can measure it and say, hey, the lifestyle, you don't have to be SOF. Anybody can potentially do that. It's still experimental, but you can actually get that. And the other part, since you're into dogs, so there is a study being done on a drug, which I personally take. It's called rapamycin. I don't know if you've heard that drug. Mm-hmm. That's been actually shown to prolong life in dogs. There's a big study going on right now, and something that I thought we can work on. I mean, we lost 2 of our dogs, and it was one of the most devastating things in the world.
Yeah. A couple things. So the UCLA program is called Grim Age.
It's their form of analysis. There's like 5 different clocks. The best one, if you compare all of them, it's called Grim Age. GRIM Age, AGE.
Okay. And like you can just Google that and find it.
Yep.
Can you do SGBs on dogs? Do you?
I've done 2.
Yeah. Have you seen efficacy?
Oh, yeah, I got to tell you that this is a great story. I love dogs.
Well, I mean, so real quick, you know, so I have the Warrior Dog Foundation where we have retired, you know, either military, working dogs, special operations dogs, police dogs, you name it. And in most cases, the ones that we get are ones with PTSD and, you know, triggered symptoms from, you know, excruciatingly difficult or traumatic experiences that they've been through that,
shocking.
Unlike with people, like they can't even begin to comprehend them. It's a simple association, but I'm curious if that same treatment on the dogs that we have, if that would actually fix it.
So let me give you an answer to that. So I would say it's not even maybe, I would say it's a strong yes, and I'll tell you the reason. Association doesn't make any difference. Understanding that there was a landmine or not doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
It's the amygdala, right?
Yeah.
So take away all the thinking part of your brain, you're no different than the dog, nor am I.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you my experience of 2 dogs so far. So the first dog was being trained to be a companion dog for a veteran. So somehow he ran away, he got stuck under a truck and got burned. And he was a really nice, polite dog, blah, blah, blah. After that, he became very aggressive. He was chewing himself out of cages. I'm sure you know the story.
Yeah.
So I treated him. So I'll send you my paper articles written about it.
Wow.
So he got better. And then recently I just did my kid's dog. So his dog lived on the street for 2 years. And his asshole owner was training him to be aggressive to the police. Horrible. So my son felt bad for him, whatever. He brought him to our home. I was frightened. I thought he was going to bite me. He was really nasty. I was one nasty dog. We tried to train him. He was like really nasty. So this was about 6 months ago. So my son says, you know, if you don't mind, let's treat the dog. So I treated him about a month ago. So my son came in for the procedure he needed. And then he brought his dog with, like we did with my wife, and our dog is great. He's a lover, right? He's like, oh, I'm a lover. So this guy was very aggressive. I was frightened, like he was going to bite me. So this time he started walking around. He was sniffing everybody. He was so nice. And like we treated a 9-year-old kid, and the kid went to tap his head, like not showing. The 9-year-old kid is no different. The dog just wagged his tail, licked his hand. I was like, I fixed the kid PTSD. He's going to lose his arm. It's like, oh my God. But if you're interested, I'm very strongly interested in that. So if we can figure out a vet, we can try like 5 or 10 dogs.
Yeah. Is it something where you could train an existing vet fairly quickly to do it?
Absolutely.
Really? We'll definitely keep in touch and work on that, because we have one of the best, is the best vet I've ever worked with by a long shot. But he's been working with our dogs for 15 years and does stuff with all of them, and I would guarantee he would be interested in.
Well,
in
if he can
this.
do it, we'll find somebody who can.
I'm
do
sure
it.
he can. He's got 2 sons that are taking over his practice as well. So
If they know how to use it, the only key point is they need to have ultrasound.
they do.
Capability.
Yeah.
But they need to know how to use it.
Yeah.
If they do, then there's no problem.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll definitely.
Yeah,
look
we'll
into
talk about it.
that.
We can talk medical with them
yeah,
because it's technically what's interesting is the dog anatomy and human.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Same.
Well, and that's our biggest hurdle, frankly, in being able to adopt these dogs out is that issue is that they have, it's like, well, I can't adopt this dog out to a civilian with
hurt
kids
somebody.
and other pets, and when
The
it's
other
like,
thing is you can. That's the main reason those dogs get put down.
yeah, wow, it's
Because they're so
fascinating.
dangerous.
Man, there's a lot of potential with that.
I would love to have.
Yeah.
I mean, animals.
Yeah.
They served our country just like the guys. How many people have they saved?
Oh, thousands. I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't even.
Like in your picture, right?
Yeah.
Who is first to the hole, to the breach?
Yeah. It's
I'm
always
sure
the dog.
he also got TBI.
Yeah, for sure.
Poor guy.
Yeah. No, I mean they suffer from it the same way, and it manifests the same. What's
Brain is the
interesting-
same.
Yeah. What's interesting is the way that we approach it from a rehab standpoint is obviously vastly different than humans would in terms of talk therapy and really in any of the mechanisms outside of SGB that
Right.
that humans use to try to work through PTSD. With a dog, it's actually really simple, is that they're making a simple association with whatever that trigger is. And so, we would desensitize them to that. Let's say it's gunfire as an example. A dog hears thunder, fireworks, any loud pops,
Goes
bangs,
nuts.
whatever, the dog loses his mind. So now, the way I or we look at it is you've got, their mind is a piggy bank. And because, they don't think in a language, everything is a simple association. You've got all these negative coins in that dog's mental piggy bank with the association to gunfire. So I want to put even more positive coins in that.
Right. Every time you give him a treat or something.
Yeah. So, but you start where it's like, instead of taking a 45 or a shotgun 10 feet away where it's going to be alarming, you've got a 22 being fired 200 yards away where the dog can barely hear it.
Oh.
And we're doing
So gradual desensitization.
yeah, and you're getting closer and louder, but you're doing tug, feeding, whatever the dog is the most highly motivated for. Some it may be food, some it may be toys, some it may be affection, and then you're just overloading that piggy bank. But that's been our approach, and it's been I'd say
It's a lot of work though, I bet.
well, it's a lot of work. It takes time, and it's not always successful. But it also doesn't address the physiological aspect. It addresses the association.
Well, I think what you're doing, it's the same. If you think about it, that is no different than teaching somebody to, it's like talk therapy. It's like everything is fine. You heard, Jason, the guy we treated 18 years ago, what brought him back after the first injection, he saw fireworks that flipped him back.
Yeah.
So you're trying to say, no, everything's fine. I'm no longer in battle. But the inside is still going crazy, right?
Yeah.
So do you use like Xanax or THC, any of that?
We've tried CBD
Right.
and had some, I would say, generally positive results. I've gotten in lots of dogs that are on trazodone, Xanax.
Right, there you go. Usual drugs.
Yeah, we always wean them off of them immediately and then use food, exercise, and a lack of pressure in association or conjunction with the desensitization stuff.
It's the same thing we try to do in humans. We try to get them off benzos first, because one of the things that people don't think about benzos in animals, or it actually shrinks your brain.
Yeah.
Benzos long term is evil.
Yeah. Well, and what I would love to know, I don't know if you've done any studies on it, but in that desensitization or making positive associations with something that was historically negative, I am curious, and again, I don't know how you do it other than doing it in dogs and extracting the CSF fluid, but I'd be curious to see if that gradual desensitization and positive association with that stimuli that has been causing the problems, if that reduces the norepinephrine in CSF over time.
Well, I haven't done the experiment, but I can kind of predict it. So let's see what you mean by that. So let's say you take a dog that was exposed to explosives. Probably know a few of those dogs, right?
Yeah.
So, and you do an intervention. which is you give them all the toys, the food, everything the dog loves. And now they stop responding, right? So once the symptoms go away, I don't need to get CSF norepinephrine.
Right.
It's already, we know it's down.
Yeah.
If it wasn't down, he would still be freaking out.
Yeah. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, it's a simple answer.
Yeah. Wow. It's
We don't need to, because it's CSF fluid, you have to put a needle below the skull and suck out the fluid.
Yeah. Man,
that's dangerous. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, what an amazing unintended consequence of this interview that I wouldn't have expected.
Well,
super cool.
Lauren had a plan.
Yeah,
she always has a plan.
Yeah, always the mastermind.
She is.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the guests that she's worked with have been on the show, and she continues to send great guests. So I'm certainly thankful to Lauren for that. So big shout out to Lauren. Thank you for always helping us out. One kind of off-topic, weird question: how do you do an SGB on a rat?
Oh, I can send you a paper, and I've never done it, but it's not. The anatomy is the same.
I guess just in that small of a space. Like, I mean, do you need like a fucking microscope to do that? I mean,
no. It's basically by feel, like the way I started in humans.
Yeah.
So a rat, so the neck is, let's say, is this big, right? So you just put it in the area and just flood the area.
Yeah. Wow.
It's only, I think they use 0.5 cc's. It's very little.
And you're probably less worried about fucking with the vocal cord in a rat.
Well, if you do one side, there's no problem with vocal cord.
Yeah, doesn't matter if you fuck.
But the point is, so you do, if you want to do 40 rats and 5 of them die from procedure, okay.
Yeah.
The point is, you can accept that fatality.
Yeah, I got you.
But in humans, my acceptance is zero.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at right now, and that's how I want to keep it.
Yeah, amen. Anything else that I haven't asked you or that you want to mention?
No, it's like if you can help promote the name change, I think if all the things we've talked about, I think SGB is only, or DSR, dual sympathetic reset, is only one of the options.
Yeah.
It's not the option.
Yeah.
So people think like, oh, this is the only thing. No. There's ketamine, there is TMS, there is probably psilocybin, there are other things available. But I think if you can do one thing with all of your capability, if you can change the name PTSD to PTSI, that will save lives.
Yeah.
Because one thing that we find it's interesting is a lot of times when I talk to people, and how do you come here? Well, my girlfriend, my significant other thought I had PTSD. I didn't think so. So a lot of people, first of all, don't believe they have it.
Yeah.
So if anybody who's listening who's like, I'm not sure, if you go on my website, dreugenelipov.com, there is a PCL. Just download that, fill it out. If you're over 44, you have it.
Yeah. A score of 44.
44, right.
Out of 100 or?
Out of, well, the maximal is 85, I believe.
Okay.
But the point, though, is the name needs to be changed. Yeah. I think if you change the name, people will accept treatments, physiologic treatment, because this is still a very weird thing for people. They cannot believe that's possible.
Yeah, I think overwhelmingly so. Most people consider it a disorder or a mental issue.
That's how they train.
Yeah, and not from a physiological standpoint.
Right,
Yeah.
but look at Civil War, right?
Yeah.
What was it called?
Yeah.
Soldier's Heart. It was physiologic. The point is there is a reason when psychiatrists decide, I'm not blaming them. It was just a
You can blame
time.
them, that's fine.
I still have to work with them. Yeah. But my point is, keep in mind, the term came up is 1980.
Yeah.
So 44 years ago, science has changed a little bit. Scans have changed a little bit. Why don't we stay with where we are and understand where we are, all those amazing scans and everything else. Let's just call it what it is and go with it. I think it'll save lives.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. PTSI it is.
Thank you.
Amen. Man, it's such a fascinating conversation. Again, I want to thank you not only for coming here and sharing your story and the procedure that you've helped bring to so many people and done so much life-changing work, but specifically with just how many of my brothers in arms that you've helped treat and change their lives. And sisters.
I've taken care of some tigresses.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Absolutely.
Lionesses.
Yeah.
Interesting people.
Yeah, no doubt.
Amazing.
Yeah. But I just can't thank you enough. I mean, you do amazing work. You continue to do so, and you've made such a difference in so many people's lives. I'm just super grateful.
Thank you. And maybe we can help dogs.
I would love to. That'd be fantastic.
Maybe all of this will get accepted because we take care of the dogs. Wouldn't
Yeah.
that be funny?
I mean, whichever way it works, right? Whatever we need.
As long as it gets done.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
What's the motto in SOF? Doesn't matter. Just it has to work.
Yeah. Get the job done.
Yeah, that's not complicated.
Yeah. Big thanks to John Johnson, Champion Choice Silver, for the parting gift from Mic Drop. I don't know if you ever wear any shit kickers and some pressed Levi's.
I will do it for you.
I'd love to get a picture of that.
Okay, we'll get it done.
Yeah. Maybe that'd be the author photo on the back of the book.
Okay,
you rocking the Mic Drop buckle. That'd be awesome.
That's so cool. My wife used to do competitive line dancing.
Oh, really?
So we may need to just get
Looks like you're going to be getting your shit kickers back.
I know. Yeah. Well, I've never had a shit kicker, but there's a good reason now.
I mean, there's Cavenders right down the road. We'll have to get you some boots. But man, thank you again for coming. I appreciate all your work.
It's an honor.
Your time, and sure appreciate it. To the listener, I hope that you found this discussion as fascinating and helpful and encouraging as I did. Appreciate your support show after show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.